the mental weight, turning the hustle into something great. It is not just about the strength you hold, but how the inner grip begins to unfold. This is the prospect podcast ground, where the secrets of the field are finally found. Building the athlete from the bone to the soul, taking the vision and reaching the goal.
All right, welcome to the Prospect Podcast. We have a treat for you today. I'm Coach Human, always on here with my man, Coach D. We just put in 12 solid hours to do it 7 at 7. So if we look like we have a tan, it's not because we actually have a tan. It's called a windburn. So
Yes.
that's what we actually have. A couple people after our tournament in Delaware, Derek, like people we know local. Actually, some people they came up to me, go, "What a great tan you have!" And like
Yeah, I got it too. I always get it.
I'm
And
like,
it's
that's
like-
a windburn.
You're like
Yeah,
from sitting out in the middle of a field for 12 hours.
It's 100 minute field for 12 hours.
Yeah.
But we no doubt about it. We have a great guest today, Coach Rob Spence. We're gonna go into his background in a second. But he is one of the gurus I was, word wise used to describe him, not just from a offensive coordinator standpoint. He's a legend from that standpoint, but also in particular how he's really developed quarterbacks over the years and having some of the best guys of all time in college football. So it's really an unbelievable opportunity to talk to Coach. I'm going to dive into a little bit of his background, but it's not going to do it justice because he'll be able to go into in depth on it. But Coach, first of all, Coach was a tight end back in the day. So for people who don't know, over at Iona, I think it was Iona College.
That's correct.
Back then.
Iona
Maybe
College.
it's Iona University now, but it's
Yep.
Iona
When I
College.
played them, it was Iona Prep. Now they're defunct, just like a lot of some other teams. But I actually got to play them at two schools, Coach. We played them at Sacred Heart, and then we played them again when I was at Montclair State. So interesting in back-to-back years, playing a D3 and then playing a FCN. So that was interesting in itself. But that's my Iona story.
Coach played there, I think through 81, and that's when he started coaching as well at the high school level. And then Coach had gone on basically a 45-year journey within coaching. Most recently, he was at Georgetown as the offensive coordinator, but Coach has been the quarterbacks coach at Rutgers, 2012, 2013. He was at Bethune-Cookman as the OC, at Temple's wide receivers coach, Syracuse, offensive coordinator 2009. From 2005 to 2008, he was OC and quarterback coach at Clemson. Had some of the best offenses of all time there. But he's also had stops at Hofstra back in the day, 97 to 99. Probably coached Gino Carmazzi is my guess at that time period. Louisiana Tech and Toledo, Maryland in the early 90s for some of their good programs. It's funny because I was being heavily recruited by Maryland by the staff that got fired. You were part of the staff that came in after that group got fired. And then even though I had an offer at the time, that offer was gone. When the next staff came in, I ended up playing at UConn. He coached at Holy Cross before that in 91. And
Great spot.
as a coach, he really is, and then ended his recently coaching, like I said earlier, at Georgetown as the offensive coordinator. One of the most experienced and knowledgeable coaches in the industry, and now does a lot of stuff from a consulting standpoint with high schools, and I'm sure we'll be back in the game in some capacity going forward, but consulting with quarterbacks and really doing some great job there from that standpoint. It's a pleasure to have Coach Rob Spence on with us. Coach, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me today. It's really an honor to be on the podcast and speak to the audience. I know you have a vast audience out there and a big following, so it's a pleasure and an honor.
Yeah, we've done a pretty good job of building this up, which started as getting mostly people we know, right? I think in the beginning, a lot of people that we know. and that went so well. And obviously we had a few college coaches on, like I had the Princeton head coach on who I know pretty well, and we had the Harvard head coach on, but we also had some great high school coaches. I think to this day, probably the most viewed, right, one is still the guy that
Yeah.
coached in high school, right, Derek?
Yeah, Coach
Mark,
Coach Mark Mickens at Butler.
Coach Mark Mickens. He got the whole town of Butler to come out and watch his podcast. So the viewership was like, we're like, wait a minute, why is there 10,000 views on this guy from a small town? You know what I mean? I was like, this, and he's a business owner as well. So he's not just a high school coach, but he's a business owner. So I could imagine some random email going out to his car customers, Derek, where all of a sudden, like, wow, coach is going to be on the on a podcast, and all his car customers are then watching, not just the people in town from a sports standpoint, but all those other guys watch. But so we've had a wide range of guys on. It's really grown. It's become a great thing, and gives us the opportunity to coach, to talk to legends like yourself, and get to learn from you and what you really know, and the wisdom you're able to share. So welcome to the podcast, Coach.
Thanks again.
All right. So I did a little bit of justice, not full justice, but a little bit of justice to your coaching background, a little bit of your coaching resume. I would love for you to kind of just take us on a journey from when you were playing through some of your years of coaching, and a lot of things that maybe you might have learned over the years, coaching at those different stops, bringing us up to today.
Love to. I think, just for the sake of the audience, I want this to be of service to the people that are listening today. But I think the first thing I would tell you is that, coaching calls you, you don't call coaching. And I really felt called to coach, but it came as a result of having very impactful people in my life that coached me and touched me at an early age. And I went to a prep school, a small school in Delaware, St. Andrews, and I was really recruited to wrestle, ended up at Lafayette with the thought that I was going to wrestle. I was in a situation that I couldn't stay there. I had some things go on, like many of us, with our family, and my family. I said, "Hey, listen, it's time to you got to come home and help us." And I left Lafayette kind of suddenly and found myself in a situation where I really was thinking about not even finishing school. And my mom and dad had gotten divorced, and my mom was the one that made me go and enroll over at Iona College. And I had spent about a year recovering from a really serious injury that kept me from playing wrestling or playing football. And when I got to Iona College, I knew I was going to do something, but I showed up, and I actually got enrolled in a spring of probably like 1978. That's so long ago. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do? And they didn't have a wrestling team, so I knew I'll play football. And that was my love anyway, playing football. And so I ended up walking on at Iona College at the time, which was Division III. And it's there that, gradually I earned the opportunity to start. And I started there for 3 seasons. I was one of the few people that back in that day that would stay for 5 years, by the way. And I stayed for the sole purpose to play football, which is not really recommended way to go, but that's what I did. And I loved it. And I came back for my 5th year, and I got hurt midway through my 5th year. And at that point in my life, my dad wasn't as involved in my life. My mom, the family situation was such where I really was looking for somebody to help lead me. And that somebody was my position coach at Iona College. And that was Pete Williams. And he had such a profound impact on my life. And just, from the standpoint of not only was he a good coach and a good teacher, but he cared. And I think that's what really resonated with me. I had been in touch with so many different coaches that were so hard. And so there's in some cases really good at teaching, but they really couldn't connect with people. And I said, I love to play for this man. I love playing the position that I was playing because he made it fun. He also was a really good teacher. And most importantly, he cared. And because he cared, he loved me. And it was, by the way, it was an unconditional love. I mean, and if you've coached college athletes, sometimes you got to love them unconditionally because they're out of their minds, and I was one of those guys. Yep. So I got hurt midway through my 5th year. And then I stood on the sidelines with a really serious shoulder injury, kind of watching. And this coach said, "Hey, help me coach." And all of a sudden I was alive again. And when I say alive, it's like I felt God's pleasure when I was teaching and coaching or helping somebody do that. And it just so happened, the way God works in our lives, that my mom remarried, and she married the athletic director of Pelham High School, who became a mentor of mine. And that guy, his name is Mickey Splett. He was the athletic director there for some years at Pelham. And he actually, said, listen, I got an idea for you after college. And because I had no idea what I was going to do after college. I was a major in social work. I was going to go back to school for education. I wanted to do a lot of different things, but I didn't really know. I knew I loved coaching, and I got an opportunity to coach at Pelham High School right out of college. And I think that was an impactful moment in my life, because I started to see how much influence and impact I could have on young men. And I just felt like a need to give myself away to the people that I was in front of. So it was a case where I was being blessed by the people I was coaching, and I want to assume, sometimes I assume I was blessing them by giving them both knowledge and love in what I did. And I just the whole idea of coaching football just started to capture me, and I really said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. But I also love teaching. So my mom had. She had been a teacher, and she had gone back to school to be a teacher. And we were both actually finishing, believe it or not, she went back to Iona College when I was finishing Iona College, and she started teaching. And I was looking for a job, and I got a full-time job teaching at a Catholic school in the Bronx, in the South Bronx on Bathgate Avenue, in an area probably that's known as Fort Apache. It's one of the toughest areas in New York City. And I went down there every day and would come home and coach at Pelham High School in the suburbs. And I'd go back into the city next day and deal with a bunch of young kids that, English was a second language, and they were coming from some rough homes. But those kind of people became my kind of people. And those are, throughout my coaching career, those are my kind of guys, for the people that didn't have quite as much, that needed somebody. And whenever I found somebody, an athlete that needed somebody to coach them, that really had a need, a personal need, where I could show them the love of God, that's who I wanted to be in front of. And I think that's part of my story, because, I didn't really know what I was going to do, but that whole element of just getting to coach early on. I was actually a head JV coach at that high school. And then here's the way God works in our lives. That particular season, right after the season, I was diagnosed with what they thought was testicular cancer. And I remember finding out on a Thursday that I had this. And then they said, you're going to have to go. We're 100% certain it's testicular cancer. And I went in for surgery in Roosevelt Hospital on a Saturday morning. And my stepfather and my mom came down with me. And I can't tell you how unbelievably painful this was, like, to know that I had no idea whether or not I'd even be alive. And it ended up being a non-malignant tumor that was taken out. And during my stay in the hospital, it was just, this is amazing, but part of my story, I saw Iona Prep was playing on TV, and they're playing Nershaw High School. And I was like, man, I would love to coach at Iona Prep someday. And I was praying to God. I said, show me the way. Well, that spring, I was at that grammar school teaching, and not sure again, whether I'd go back there or go back to Pelham High School, but I knew I wanted to coach. And I got a call from a coach that I didn't know at Iona Prep, that had just taken the job at Iona Prep, and he called to see if I'd be interested in coming on as one of the assistants. And that's how I ended up at Iona Prep, 2 years out of college, and later would become the head football coach at Iona Prep for 5 years, the youngest head coach in New York State at the time. I was 24 years old. And when I took over Iona Prep, they were 0-11, by the way. And I was actually the JV coach there, and we went, I think, 10-1. I think we lost our first game and won every single game since then. And the varsity went 0-11. And it was a little like the Pat Riley story, with the Lakers. Yeah. He was a ticket manager. Well, I was 3 years out of college, and I said, I'll take the job if nobody wants it. They couldn't find anybody that knew the kids as well as I did. So I got the job to be the head coach there. And we turned it around, thankfully. And I had 5 unbelievable years as a head coach there that I'll never forget. And I love Iona Prep as a result. And here I am every year I'm the head coach. I'm thinking, I want to go coach in college. I want to go coach in college. My mom had along the way kind of convinced me to go back and get my master's degree in education, which I did, because I love teaching. I was an American history teacher, but I love teaching
Yes.
football more. And so, there began the journey. And then I went from there. And this one aspect of my story is like the calls come when you least expect it.
Always.
I had interviewed at Columbia for a position job. And believe me, I spent like 5 years looking for the right GA job to get into college. And I got to the point where like, Lord, I'm never going to have an opportunity to coach college football. And here I am. It's like March of my 5th season after being at Iona College. And one of my coaching friends out in Long Island says, hey, call Hofstra University. Okay. And you just can't believe this. I mean, I call Hofstra University and the head coach picks up, who just got hired. His name was Joe Gardy. It was a Saturday afternoon. I'll never forget it. And he talked to me on the phone a little while, and he had just finished interviewing like 6 people. He couldn't convince any of his pro friends to come down to coach Division III football. So here I am talking to the head football coach. He calls me back, and that's like a miracle in and of itself. And then he says, come on in Monday and I'll interview you. So I went on Monday and interviewed, and the interview went phenomenal. And this is March, when there's no football jobs available, none whatsoever.
No jobs.
Wednesday, He calls me up and he says, how would you like to be a Flying Dutchman? And I was like, it was one of the greatest moments in my life. I mean, I was like, here I am going from, basically being a teacher at Iona Prep. And I spent a year, I spent 1 year in between being an offensive coordinator, part-time pay at Iona College, where I did play. And then Joe Gardy calls me here out of the blue, and I end up at Hofstra University, and we almost win a national championship that year. We end up with the #1 offense in the country in Division III. I coached an All-American quarterback, Rory Moss, and an incredible football team that went to the Final Four in Division III and should have won the whole thing, but injuries and all that. But that kind of started my career, and then I went from there to Holy Cross when they were scholarship and transitioned into the Patriot League, and our head coach got Mark Duffner, who I just love, who was just an incredible head football coach. He took the job at University of Maryland. He took me with him, and I spent 6 years all told with Mark Duffner, who had a profound impact on me. One of the things that I did is when I took jobs, whenever I was considering taking a job, I always considered who I would work for.
Yes.
And I always wanted to go someplace where I could learn from anybody on the staff and everybody on the staff. And I always looked at, when I talked to young coaches, I said, you have to go places where you can learn, and you have to be around people that are willing to invest in you and teach you and mentor you and love you and show you the right way to coach. And, I think that all too often we look at what looks to be like a great role model, and they're not, unfortunately. And I'm just saying that there's some people that do it better than others. And I'm talking about there's some people that love their players and they coach with the highest degree of excellence in their particular area. And those are the people that you want to be around. Those are the people that are going to be most impactful in this business. From Maryland, Coach Duff, and I were there for 5 years that, we ran the run and shoot where I became known. I traveled nationally, clinicking on the run and shoot, coaching the quarterbacks there. And it was just an incredible experience for a young coach. And here I am. I thought I'd never get a chance to coach in college. And then I got an opportunity after Mark Duffner got fired after 5 years. I went back to Hofstra, and Joe Gardy was still there. He hired me back, and I had 3 phenomenal years and had a chance to coach Gio Carmazzi, who was the second quarterback at that time. I had Scott Milanovic at Maryland, who was an All-American. Then when I got to Hofstra, I inherited a player known as Gio Carmazzi, who ended up being drafted in 1999 by the 49ers, who was the second quarterback taken in the draft. That was the year that Tom Brady was drafted, by the way, and everybody knows who Tom Brady is. Nobody knows who Gio Carmazzi is, but Gio was a phenomenal player who ended up getting hurt. And that's one of the reasons why I want to train quarterbacks. His arm got worn out, and that's the only reason we don't know about him. He had a phenomenal talent there. But I went from Hofstra, from there to Louisiana Tech, and coached Luke McCown as a true freshman who played in the NFL a number of years. He was a freshman working at Louisiana Tech. And then I got an opportunity to go to Toledo. And that was probably one of the greatest opportunities in my lifetime as well. I got a call from a man I don't even know, Tom Amstutz, who ends up being a great friend of mine. And, we had probably the best run in the history of a storied program at University of Toledo. And our offenses were top 10 in the country. And that's where Coach Bowden, Tommy Bowden, ended up seeing our offenses play on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, when the MAC would play every night, you can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
And we play anybody. If you'd pay us, we'd play it.
That's it.
That's the way it worked.
Remember, it'd be like Mac night. It would be
Mac Nation.
Night.
Mac Nation night. Tuesday, Wednesday. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
It's before,
Right.
really kind of football and
Everybody
the NFL,
plays
and
now
everybody
all over.
started to play on every day of the week. I mean, people were just like, it was only Mac Nation that was doing those games in midweek.
Yeah, it was crazy because you try getting home on a Tuesday night game at midnight and then having everybody end up go to class and
Oh,
try to
yeah.
go get it. Yeah, that was not happening sometimes. I hate to say, because it was
I think that's the side of high level football that a lot of people don't really understand.
It absolutely is, and that became a passion of mine, is to make sure people graduate. By the way, we had a pretty good graduation rate there, but I had met Coach Tommy Bowden at his quarterback academy down in Auburn with all the Bowdens, and I'd met him probably about 5 years before he got to Toledo, and he called me up and offered me a job to come to Clemson when they weren't very good, and they had the worst offense in the ACC. I ended up taking the job in 2005. I went down there in January, and we turned that into a record-setting offense. I'd say. Coach Sweeney was my wide receiver coach, Dabo Sweeney, and we had a bunch of good moments there. We set over 75 school records there at Clemson at the time, and that gave Coach Sweeney a foundation to build on once he got the job, to really take that thing to another level. I went from Clemson to Syracuse, and our coach Greg Paulus there. Greg Paulus ended up. That's a great story. That was one of my favorite coaching stories because he played point guard at Duke. And
crazy. It's that was right around my era. Like that was right around when I was high school, college-ish, right? Like kind of getting into it, and a true two-sport like guy. And then went basketball, and then hey, I like that, just passion for the game of football still, and then have the opportunity to kind of go home because I believe he was from like upstate New York.
He was from CBA Academy, Christian Brothers Academy, just outside of Syracuse. And Coach Marone, Doug Marone, who was the head coach at Syracuse, he hired me, and he said, we only had a freshman at quarterback. We had Ryan Nassett that I thought was going to be really good, and
it turned out, he wasn't too shabby either.
No, he was a phenomenal player. But he was a freshman, and he was kind of bright-eyed and scared. And Paulus came in and beat him out. I worked with Paulus all summer long. He hadn't played any football for 4 years. He was
a point guarding for Mike Krzyzewski, for God's sakes.
And he went out and had a pretty good season. His only season at Syracuse, he did a pretty good job. And one problem with Greg is, like I used to explain to him all the time, this is not basketball. Like, turnovers are really, really costly in this game called football. Okay,
you can't be just throwing this thing away, dude.
Right, exactly. But he was a character. Greg Paulus is still coaching college basketball right now. But so I then from there, like any coach, we move all over the place, and I went from there to Temple and coach the wide receivers there, and then went on to coach at 2 HBCUs, Morgan State, back in 2015, and I was at Bethune-Cookman in 2010. So I've had a wide variety of experiences. I ended up Kyle Flood hired me to go up to coach quarterbacks at Rutgers in 2012 and 13, and had Gary Nova, had old Gary Nova there from North Jersey.
Yep, Bosco guy.
He could play ball now. Gary,
one of the best quarterbacks to ever go to Rutgers. You know what I mean?
I love coaching
especially
Gary.
Numbers wise, and then he had a hell of a. He kind of started that whole boat post.
That's right.
Greg Schiano of keeping guys in state and having guys from those big schools kind of come back to Rutgers. And look, they had a really good offense there for a couple of years with Leonte Carew and a couple of those guys really kind of did some things. Flood did some nice things there. Right? A lot of people blame him for but I think he really did a good job.
No, he did. He did do a good job, and but Gary really was fun to coach, and we had a good time on offense there. And my wife got a little worn out with the moving all over the country. So we decided to take a job down in Tennessee in Chattanooga. That's how we came to live here at a high school. And the plan was never to go back to coach and have to move all over the country again. And I missed college coaching so much. I ended up doing it for 2 years, and we turned a small high school into a pretty good football program down here, Chattanooga Christian. And then I just felt this call to go back and coach in college, and that's been my ministry. And I went back to University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and that was a joy. And I spent a year there. And then Coach Scarlotta ended up calling me up, and I ended up at Georgetown, which was really an experience because I'd never been at a school with that kind of academic pedigree and coaching through student athlete, which is a whole nother experience in a coach's life. But, it's all in all, it's been phenomenal. And I've been blessed to be able to coach at all these different levels. And it's really about the people that you coach and being able to find people that you can pour yourself into and see them grow as human beings and show them the love of God as you're doing that.
No doubt about it. It's an incredible journey. It really, really is an incredible journey. And all the different athletes you've worked with and coaches. It's interesting. I remember when Tommy Bowden went to Clemson. He also was originally at Auburn, right? That was
correct.
Like when he had won, and then
that's where you met him, right, Coach? When he was at Auburn?
The Bowden family. Actually, had coached against them while I was in the ACC at Maryland for those 5 years with Doug. Okay. And that's how they knew who I was. And I went into their quarterback camp to work that summer. It was the Bobby Bowden, Tommy Bowden, Terry Bowden. It was called the Bowden Quarterback Academy. And I actually stole the idea and bought it north the way we did it down there. I did it up at Hofstra. It became kind of something everybody does now. But back then, it was really unusual the way we set it up. And I met the whole Bowden family there, which was really impactful. And they had just had a beautiful way about them and the way they did things with all the brothers were very unique. They were all different. I know Terry Bowden pretty well. And Tommy, obviously, I worked for 4 years. And they were very unique people that loved their athletes. And they also coached at a really super high level.
No doubt about it. And Mark Duffner is a phenomenal. I mean, I'm sure you guys are great friends. I got to know him. He recruited me when he was at Holy Cross, and then I got to know him when I was an NFL agent for 7 years, and he was working in the NFL.
Yeah,
and he was so great. Like, he was so helpful, and he helped get a couple of my guys in, but he was just. Besides that part, he was just so great to talk to, and he would actually talk to you, which a lot of, the NFL is a very, very results oriented. Even as much as college is, the NFL to me is even more results orientated, and just because of obviously the nature of the beast, right? So. But he was so great. Like, he would always take time to talk to you, and he would give me advice with guys and stuff. I mean, he was just.
I've heard him speak at Glacier clinics. He was great.
He would be like, right? "Is this the legendary Mark Duffner I'm talking to? Like, taking the time to actually talk with me? But that's what I was found to. I'm sorry, Derek. I didn't mean to interrupt. But that's
no. I was just adding a tidbit. Like, I've heard him speak. He was a great speaker at Glacier Clinic. I took a shit ton from him. One of those like, hey, I'll just listen to this guy thinking, okay, for the next session or whatever. And before I knew it, I had like 4 pages of notes. And I believe he was doing something at the time with the Tampa Bay Bucks a couple years ago. Right. That's where it was. But it's just like it's just a charisma about him. Like, you were just drawn. I'm like, damn, I'd like to model my stuff after him, Yeah,
I think that's one of the reasons that I gravitated when asked to work at Holy Cross, where he was head coach. I wanted to be around great teachers. I wanted to see what they look like, and I want to be known as a great communicator. And I want to teach communication. I want to teach that to younger coaches. And I also think that when you mention Mark Duffner, therein lies the secret to being great. Like, he connects with people, and he loves the people in front of him. And just as a side note, having traveled all over the country recruiting my whole life and evaluating players, I get to watch coaches all the time. And I will tell you without a doubt, there's so many high school coaches out there that are far superior to some of the coaches in the NFL and some of the coaches in the highest level of college football. There's some great teachers in high school. I know there's a ton of them, and I meet them and see them and watched them my whole entire career. And I think that sometimes we get this idea that because so-and-so coaches at this school, that they might be a better coach than this person who coaches at another school. And the school you coach at has nothing to do with the quality of coach you're going to become. It's about the people. It's about how you teach the people that are in front of you. It's about the quality of your lesson plan on that day, on that moment, in that atmosphere. And that's what it's all about. It's to take the one day that you have and make that day special for the people that are in front of you, because that's who you're responsible for. That's who God put in front of you in that moment. And that's what energizes me as a coach. I feel his pleasure. I feel the Lord's pleasure when I'm doing that kind of teaching instead of thinking about myself. And too often we run into people that have no time for us. And I have been in that environment myself, and I have made that mistake. And I know how I feel when I run up against somebody who I think is really a great coach and he has no time for me. He can't remember my name and he walks right by me. And I think that one of the things that's happened in college athletics, because the NIL and the age of money, is that we have seen the age of amateurism just disappear in college athletics. It's gone. It's forever gone. So you can't tell me right now that college athletics is really any different than, professional sports, because it is professional sports. And it just depends on where you are and what school you represent now, and how much NIL money they have and what they're doing with that money, and how they can buy and purchase better players than you can purchase. And, I just had a discussion with one head coach in an FCA school, and he was talking about a school they had to play that, their head coach was saying, yeah, we've got, $900,000 invested in this team right here, right now, that you're going to play. And the team that this coach represented, they had about $200,000 in NIL money at FCS level.
It's an arms race.
Yeah, you tell me what's going to happen. But that's the nature of the beast, and that's what we built here, and that's what we've allowed to happen. Yep. And I'm not saying it's all bad, because it certainly isn't bad at all. It's not all bad. I'm just saying that we definitely are entering a different world, and we got to walk through that world, and we got to be knowledgeable of what it looks like, so that we can counsel our athletes and take care of our young people.
Right. And it's like we talked about a little bit before we got on here with the NIL and the transfer portal, right? We've now seen college football staffs, right, start to expand with so many people a part of it that, people wouldn't look at and say, oh, that they're a college coach, right? Because coach now doesn't pertain to almost majority of what's a part of a staff in general. You have your marketing people, you have your you have GMs, right? You have your scouting departments, right? Where guys are literally, not only scouting high school athletes, which I think have been, now they're less of what's being recruited out there now. But you have guys responsible for recruiting high school athletes. You have guys that literally just monitor the portal and are looking at, hey, is this guy going to leave, or is this guy going to do that? We've talked to so many people across the board at all levels, and the trickle down effect of now that's what's happening, where years past, even 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? Like most guys, when you transferred, you went down a level, or it was lateral, maybe, right? Now we see this whole thing of working the other way, where guys transferring up, right? I mean, we're talking about Division III quarterback from Christopher Newport, just, going up to an FBS level, right? I mean, guys are getting opportunities going a different direction. And for, a high school coach, it's very difficult, right? And look, I get it. I'm kind of the outlier in the fact that, like, Coach Schumann and I, we do this stuff for a living, right? Like, we're constantly in the recruiting world, or talking to athletes, or we're in the know of what it is. Whereas a lot of high school coaches, they don't understand that. They're still thinking it's kind of the way it used to be. And with the way college recruiting has changed in just 6 months, a year, right? Like, I mean, these things are constantly changing. If you're not staying up on it and doing your homework, or at least have someone on your staff that's kind of plugged into it or understand it, you're going to be left by the wayside. It's really interesting, Coach, just your journey in general. And you touched on it a little bit, Georgetown University, right? I mean, resonates across board. Everybody knows who Georgetown is.
Right.
But do they really know Georgetown as a football school, right?
Right.
That's difficult. The academic side as well, right? What was that experience like for you, having been at those higher levels? Now you go to Georgetown, which adds its own kind of difficulties, I guess, in, you know, the recruiting world, playing, right? You're dealing with a different type of athlete, like the area itself geographically where it is, like it's a hotbed, but you know, are those hotbed guys, do they want to go to Georgetown? I don't know, right? So tell me a little bit about that experience for you. How was that? Because it's all, look, I love it. I think it's a great school. But just what was that experience like for you?
Well, I think I got an education into how good Ivy League football can be. We cross over with the Ivies. So my first year there was an experience trying to compare like the teams that I was playing against the teams like in the Southern Conference on the way to try to beat Sam Houston, for example. We played at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, that I was at 2 years prior. We went to the Final 16 in the NCAA playoffs. And, you know, the defenses that I encountered my first year at Georgetown, 2018, two stand out. Dartmouth was phenomenal. They were better than anybody I coached against at UTC. And then also the last game of the year, regular season game that we played against Colgate, they were ranked 10th in the country that year. And they were, of course, they were Patriot League champion that year. Now, their two defenses were better than anybody that we encountered en route to go play Sam Houston. And Sam Houston's defense wasn't as good as either two of those teams. So what I started to discover is the teams we were playing, they were finding a way to get a really good student athlete, emphasis on the student, and not neglect the athlete part either. You know, we are, you know, it's a little known fact that, you know, that this is true, that the level of football in the Patriot League is really, really outstanding. And we had an interesting experience during my 7 years there, in that COVID hit. And when COVID hit, we didn't play that season. And we were, my first season, we were 5-6 in 2018, and we were a game away from we were up 30-3 against Holy Cross in our last game, and lost, and going in the fourth quarter and lost 33-3. So that would have been one of the greatest turnarounds in college football. And so we were capable of competing. We just didn't have probably the depth as some of those other teams did. The next year in 2019, we went 5-6 again. And we got out to a really, really good start and lost our quarterback. And, you know, we were showing that we could compete in that league and that our talent was going to be equal to theirs. And then, you know, when we had COVID hit, and then it was 2 hard years after COVID because we didn't play. We didn't compete. Our players weren't even in a weight room. Right. So it took us 2 years to rebound from COVID, the year we didn't play. And then when we got going again, we like in 2023, we ended up going 5-6. And, you know, that was a growing year. We had Tyler Knopp, who was a 5th-year senior, play there. And, you know, we beat that year, we beat Fordham, who was ranked 16th in the country at our field, and on the last drive of the game. And we had a couple of significant wins during my time there. This year we went 6-6. We were 500, the best record in the history of the school, going Division I at that time, you know, in the Patriot League. And that was a pretty good year, but we felt like we underachieved. We did that with a backup quarterback. And I guess my point is that in the experiences, we found that we could recruit a really good player. We're just going to have to be really diligent about how we do it and who we recruit. We were the only school in the conference that did not offer an athletic scholarship. So we were given financial aid, and we were packaging very similar to the Ivies, so that we had a different model of recruiting, and we learned how to make do with what we have. Nobody there would complain about what we don't have. Our head football coach would not allow us to even talk about it. We focused on what we do have, which is a phenomenal education to offer somebody, and a life-changing education too. And,
absolutely.
You know, that's what happened. And, you know, I thought one of the things that was really evidence to me is at a place like Georgetown, is a significant part of our team were from places that you would never think they'd come from to go to Georgetown University. And, you know, what I'm talking about is, like, I recruited Tennessee, and we had 3 or 4 players that, you know, did not pay a dime to go to a place like Georgetown, that never had a family member go to college. They were first-generation college student, and they had a program at Georgetown to meet the needs of these at-risk students, and they would graduate at an unparalleled rate. So it depends on how you define success, because Georgetown was competing on the field although we didn't win a championship. We were getting closer and closer. And I think that that's within the realm of possibility for them. But it's just a matter of, like, when you have leadership that believes, hey, we're going to do the best we can with what we've got, and don't make excuses, don't whine, don't cry, don't complain, just do the best you can and don't be a victim. Work with what you got and find creative ways to do what you can with what you have. And that's one of the things that I'm most proud of when you go to places that are have-nots, so to speak, and you can make them competitive, and you can give them the experience that they deserve just by being a great coach and a communicator and building a team. You know, the most important thing as a coach is that you build a team. It's not the best players. It's a team that plays the best on any given, Saturday afternoon that's going to win the game. And you've got to be artful and as a football coach on how you create a team atmosphere and build a culture. And that's something that you have to be vigilant about, and you have to be on top of. And it's a never ending process.
There's no doubt. That's one of the hard things in today's world is it's the transactional nature
Right.
of sports and how that's changed. And I mean, even me coaching, going from high school coaching youth, like that can be youth sports can be very transactional too.
Oh God.
Very much so.
Because you coach a kid and you get along great, and somebody's unhappy for multiple reasons. Could be your fault, could be their fault.
Right.
Could be anything, right? And then you don't get an opportunity to coach them again, right? So it's very difficult. But it's funny because it's like I feel like it's just all that stuff, even at the youth level, just having coached high school for so many years, comes from the fact that it's become transactional at levels above them, and maybe there's a push from the bottom too. I don't know. It could be push bottom, push down, but it's confirmed now at the higher levels. You know what I mean? So whereas there may be some push from the bottom because of the nature of youth sports and trickle into high school and all that kind of stuff. High school and college used to be a wall for that. You know what I mean? Like it would end at high school. I mean, not that there weren't people that transferred here and there. That'll always happen. But even when it was less transactional. But what's happened is the culture of it becoming transactional is now so prevalent that it's everywhere in sports, and obviously at the highest level, right? And what's so difficult about college, and different from the NFL to college to me, is that the NFL, you have contracts, right? So even though it's transactional, I know that this transaction lasts X amount of time period, right? So if I have a guy, unless I trade him or something like that, I have them for a few years. I know what my plan could be with them for a certain time period, whether it's 2 years, whether it's 1 year, whether it's depending on the contract, right? I know what my development time frame is. What's much harder for college and high school now in certain places, okay, but maybe eventually it becomes a lot of places, I don't know, but is that because it's such free agency that you don't know, so you may build in a 4-year plan for an athlete and you get 1 year into the plan and that person's gone, right? Or that could be your half your roster nowadays in college.
No doubt.
You know what I mean?
No
Right?
doubt.
So I think it begins to trigger over time the kind of coach that you're going to have in that industry. And I think we're even seeing it in high school. Now, Derek's still in high school, so I always kind of now defer to him because I'm really on the outside now. I haven't coached high school since COVID was my last year. That was quite an experience as well. But I mean,
to say the least. To say the least.
Yeah. That was my last year of head coaching in high school. So, I've been coaching youth kids and I still run all the stuff we do with events and recruiting, but it's the last year with that. And so, but I think that transactional nature changes potentially what kind of people succeeds in that area, right? So the stuff that you talked about, I think great coaches can succeed in any environment. I do truly believe that. But I believe what they have to fight through in order to get to become a great coach is going to be very different, right? It's very, very different. And it will require no longer the fortitude of, okay, I'm a GA, I'm this, I'm that, and this kind of process situation. And in high school, I'm an assistant, I'm the JV coach, then I'm a coordinator, I'm a head coach, right? Or something along those lines. Whereas now it's, okay, who can I go learn from immediately? What is that person's credentials that I can go and work for? Because if I stick myself to that person and he's successful, then I could jump to my next opportunity.
Right.
And it's similar like that in high school a little bit too, right? Like Derek now works for a guy who's a very, very well-known head coach too, right? And has done really great job at all the places he's been. Um, but I'm sure if he probably feels with some of the guys that he might work with here and there, like, oh, they want to come in. This guy's been an established head coach. He's done really well. Let me learn from this guy so I can go to jump to my next job. And then, you don't know what you're always dealing with if you are the head coach, right? Because in the old days, and you can correct me if wrong, I'll let you speak on this a little bit, but I'm sure you could identify who those guys were pretty quickly on your staff in the old days. And like, okay, this guy's a climber, that's really what he wants to be. And, he does this really well, but we know he's going to be gone. Right. And then this guy right here is really looking to learn the best way he can. Whereas now it's very hard to know who's a climber and who's willing to learn, because yourself as a head coach, you might have to figure out year to year, like what your own roster is like. And that's super transactional, right? And that makes you transactional, even if that's not your philosophy as a coach, but
Yeah.
it starts to make you transactional. And it's like, it's very, very difficult. I'm curious your thoughts on, obviously, someone who's just left, that part of the game, and it was probably creeping into everything you guys were doing. Talk a little bit about some of the kind of thoughts I expressed there.
Well, I think that what you are seeing nowadays is it's in this generation of coaches, the younger coaches, is a lack of patience to develop where they are and to appreciate where they find themselves in the moment that they find themselves. And there's this dissatisfaction with many of them where they are at, and they want to climb as fast as they can and as quick as they can. And I think that they see that, the one example of somebody who gets this incredible opportunity at a very young age, and they think that's everybody. And I think that the grit required and the resilience required to be really good at anything requires you to spend time at doing anything and doing it well, instead of always looking forward to the next opportunity. You don't do what is in front of you like it should be done, the job that you've been given. I think that when you make yourself indispensable to your head coach, and in my opinion, this is people would use the phrase old school, but this is an important quality, is loyalty and also service. You are there to serve the people around you, and you are there when you become an assistant coach. You are there to serve your head coach and make him better. And you're there to make the environment better that you're in. And if you do that really, really well where you are, people will take notice. And that's organically how you get your next opportunity, by doing well at where you are. People recognize that. If you're at a school that is a have-not and they don't have the resources of other schools, sometimes people the really good coach will observe somebody working hard at their craft and knows that guy's really good at what he does. He just doesn't have the talent that I have. And that's why he's where he is and I'm where I am. So those people that are smart enough to recognize character, recognize intelligence, recognize communication skills, recognize people that care about what they do, those are the kind of people that you want to work for. And those are the kind of people that are going to hire you if you're that kind of person. If you find yourself on the other side of it, where you're just going to do anything and everything and do the most expedient thing in front of you to get the next job, then you're never going to have established any roots. You may never develop a foundation of being a great teacher of anything. And you're not in the long run going to have invested in the foundation of your knowledge to be a great coach. And that's one of the things that I learned along my way with Mark Duffner. I wasn't looking to just find another job. Now in college football, you get fired. So a lot of, you end up, if your head coach leaves, you end up having to look for a job. You could be super successful and you end up having to move. So all the moves that people make aren't made because they want to move. And some of them they're not good for their families. And that's what makes this so doggone hard. And I think that part of the reason people look all the time is because they're afraid. And that fear drives them to keep looking for a job, or drives them to look for the next best opportunity. And that's where, I came to faith. Jesus found me when I was at Lafayette College, and I trusted him and said yes to him. So he has my coaching career, and I trusted him with that. And I said, where do you want to take me? Now, I didn't always go to these places excited about going at the moment, but like I found he had a reason for taking me there, and he had people that he wanted me to meet, and he had people that he wanted me to coach. And I had to bring a message to people about the gospel and the good news to different people. So I looked at it differently, and I looked at it more differently as I got older, because I saw the shallowness and the lack of depth of some of what was going on around me. And not to say that I haven't been a part of that, because I have, but I'm trying now. I'm kind of a champion for doing this the right way, and doing it the way that we know to be best for the people that we're coaching. I look at our jobs as coaches, as doctors. We shall do no harm. We're not supposed to hurt the people we work with. We're supposed to build them up. We're supposed to enlarge them. We're supposed to get the most out of them. We're enlargers by nature, and we're to take people places where they cannot go on their own. And that kind of motivation drives a coach differently than, oh, I want this job or that job. And that's where there's two levels of coaches. There's those that are transactional, and there's those that are transformational. And I think that my message to the audience is, you want to be a transformational coach.
No doubt.
You want to be the coach where, like 40 years from now, when you're finished and that person that you coach realizes, aha, I got it. That's why coach told me this.
Right.
I watched him. And to believe me, our athletes learn more by watching than they do by what you say. So every time, like, for example, you bring your family to practice. Absolutely. And some of the players on your team, they don't even know what a family looks like.
Right.
And you're actually teaching them, you're helping them to show them what love looks like. And it's tough sometimes. And so there's so many valuable aspects of our lives that we can share with our players that are so deep that aren't being shared anymore, because we're constantly in a rush to do things. We're constantly thinking about the outcome of a game, instead of what is that soul in front of me all about. God put that young man or that young lady in front of me for a reason today, and I better invest myself in them and give them everything I've got in that moment, so that I can go to bed that night feeling like I did my very best for the one that I served, the real one that I served. And I think that, again, that was my way of approaching my job lately in my life. And that's from looking back, and I have seen a tremendous change in our profession as a result of what you're talking about, Coach Human. I mean, you couldn't be more right. And it has trickled down, and much of the trickle down nature of the negative part of our business is percolating because of social media and the power of the media over our young people today.
Oh,
and and that's a whole nother story and a whole nother battle that they're facing, because when you pick this phone up, and you look at social media, you're going to see a lot of lies, and you're going to see a reality that's not a reality. And that's what they're diving into all day long. And you got to live with it. But as a coach, as a parent, you got to learn how to monitor that, and you got to learn how to protect your son or your daughter and keep their identity intact as they move forward in this process. And that's why coaches matter. That's why this business, I'm upset when I see people underpaid or undervalued at schools. And I'm like, when I watch the high school coach, and I look at the hats that he has to wear, the responsibility that he has on his shoulders or her shoulders, I'm amazed at how they don't get more positive feedback from their administrators and their administration and the people around them. But it's become harder.
They're looking.
It's become harder.
What it is they're looking to gotchas. That's the problem. A lot of administrators, and I've experienced it over the years, and I've had some great administrators, and I've had some ones that were not great, right? And things I always noticed with great administrators that at least that I've been around, the great administrators I've been around are understand that people are flawed,
Right.
okay, and they make mistakes, but they don't put them on the cross because they made a mistake, right? And I think that's a big, big difference between a good administrator and one who
Right.
isn't. The bad administrators are looking for what the flaw is and to try to either A, um, turn them into something they're not, or B, blame them when that flaw comes out. And the good administrators see, okay, there's a flaw. Can I help him through that?
Right.
Can I make him aware of it? You know what I mean? If there is a flaw, can I coach him through that? Can I what can we do to make him successful, right? Because every coach has flaws. Every coach has things they
Right.
do really, really well, and every coach has things that they wish would not happen to them,
Right.
right? This is just, and the best coaches are ones who are able to continue to work through those things without losing who they are as a coach, in my opinion, right? Like the things that make them a great coach, being able to leverage those things that are their flaws, figuring out how they either can work around that or improve on that, and that makes them a better coach. And I think great administrators recognize that. I think the other issue that sometimes administrators get into is they think the perfect coach exists.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
and my example a lot of times now is because he's so perfectly flawed is Danny Hurley, right? Like Danny Hurley is a phenomenal coach, and he is also phenomenally flawed. You know what I mean? And maybe that's what makes him a great coach. You know what I'm saying? And so if you were just to look at Danny Hurley and watch him without watching him around his players during the day, or without watching him maybe have dinner with them or interact with them when the cameras aren't around him instead of sound bites, you would paint a picture of him, right?
Yeah.
But the players don't paint that picture of him. So you always say, like, social media creates a disconnect between Danny Hurley and what actually, and he's my example because he's so easy to watch on TV, and I went to UConn, and it's so easy to watch and to see how he is, and people are like, oh, they're waiting for him.
They're
not
waiting
to do
for
well.
that one thing that is gonna get everybody to
he's
click on
going to
it.
win. He's going to win. He's going to have great relationships with players, and
people hate that.
in an area that's very a world that is more transactional. He's obviously very well trained as a young person, whether he wanted to be trained that way or not from his father. Right? Like whether
Right.
his father,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Just playing for his father, being around his father all those years, you're getting a certain amount of training. So, and I just think that that's my example of where like so many administrators would be like, I can't hire Danny. I can't hire Danny Hurley. Well, I can't hire Danny. Well, why can't you hire him? He yells too much. But no, he actually yells probably the whole entire game. Okay. He doesn't yell at moments. He yells the whole entire game. So it doesn't yell too much. He yells the whole entire game. But he's also brilliant in how he gets things out of his players and how he relates to his players and how he motivates them. And every person is different. I would say Tony Dungy's the opposite. Still had the has unbelievable success in what he does in an incredibly different way than Danny Hurley. Okay. But people think that Tony Dungy is going to walk through the door, that style, and that's going to work. There's so many young guys
He's
who
been
try to be
fired
Tony
too.
Dungy, and they're terrible. They're terrible at being Tony Dungy. I watch these young guys think that, okay, I have to get into the door, so I got to be like Tony Dungy, right? And they get into the door. They don't know how to relate to players. They don't take time for players, okay? Tony Dungy learned his philosophy and his style over many, many years and figured out what worked within his personality, as did Danny Hurley with his style and his personality, which is what makes them both great in very different ways. And I think that that's an important thing with coaching. And a lot of parents also have a hard time with this in today's
Very
world
difficult time.
because they don't understand uh, the personalities of people as well because of social media. A lot of the young, and I see this a lot with guys in their 20s, and me and Derek are around so many of them in the stuff that we do, and we see some that are phenomenal, do it really really well, and we see some that like they just you're like they should get it but they don't get it, and we can't even figure out why. You know what I mean? Like this guy should be good but he just isn't good, and and they don't take instruction, and they don't take direction, and it's part of the over emotional part of what's happened to me in society because of social media, that everything is an emotion. And our generation of kids, like mine and
Yeah.
Derek's, like because we both he has young kids younger, like I feel like those kids are starting to respond a little bit better towards
Oh,
not
definitely.
being like the generation ahead of them, because of that generation ahead of them struggles with a lot of things. And
Yeah.
I've started to see it with those kids. Like they're more resilient. And the ones who aren't, like I can tell you, they're just going to be off. And I see a big disconnect between it. And I have one theory that's really interesting. So the kids in their 20s and the teens now to maybe up towards maybe close to 30, social media has been a large part of their lives. What's going to happen with the kids that are my son's generation, that he's 10 and Derek's are younger, toddlers, and infants. And what's going to happen there is AI has become so big
That's right.
because robots and everything is going to be done for you. You're going to need to be able to communicate and coach. And the only people, and I'm not saying coach like sports, I'm saying like be a coach as far as how you handle things, have the personality, because those people are going to be the ones that are going to be at a premium, because I'm going to be able to get my accounting done from a computer. I'm going to be from AI. Eventually, I'm going to be able to get most of daily tasks that a lot of the kids that just in the computer social media generation wanted to be. I'm going to be able to get all of that from AI eventually, whether people like it or not. That's up for debate. But you're going to be able to get most of that from. You're going to be able to get analytics for football,
That's true.
where they're going to tell you exactly what's going to happen, and you're going to be able to have the personality,
It's gonna be
the
like
knowledge
baseball.
to decipher how to make decisions and to communicate those decisions to people. And if you can't do that, you're going to really struggle in a world where everybody can get any piece of analytics they want. I can figure out what you're running. Some guy's going to hand it to me in 2 seconds. And if I can't communicate that to people and solve problems, we're going to have a big, big issue. And I think that these kids are going to be forced to be able to do that, because otherwise they're not going to be able to work. There's going to be no job. There's not going to be very few jobs for them, unless they're going to be a plumber or something along those lines, working with your hands. There are jobs that still might be
Trades.
available to work with hands. You're going to have to figure out how to communicate with people, and you're going to have to be able to figure out how to solve problems. Where that generation above them, that was taken away
No
from
way.
them, and everything became emotional, and a lot of things became
Yep.
emotionally driven, and less problem solving because of social media, because of the all of a sudden information age of things being available to them. And now they're going to have to communicate, because stuff is just going to be done for you. And if you can't communicate, you're going to be out of a job. And I think that that's what's going to happen. And the kids that start to learn that, and the parents are going to start to figure it out pretty quick. They don't figure that out. They just baby their kids, literally baby their kids, and just say, plod along, child, and they don't help them solve things. It's going to go almost a little bit back to some level of old school, even though people don't realize that, because of the fact that when everything is going to be able to be available to you, the person that's going to be successful is going to have not just it's knowledge is going to be given to you. You're going to have to be able to solve problems. You're going to have to be able to coach yourself to an extent, coach others and lead others. Otherwise, you'll have very little value, So it's really, really interesting. And they're seeing with engineers, like I see Facebook let go of a bunch, Amazon let go of a bunch of engineers, guys who thought my knowledge was the key to everything. Well, no, I don't need that anymore. I could go on a computer and do half the things that an engineer can do in 1/10 the time. And now those guys, if they can't solve problems, they're not going to be valuable. And so I think that that's a really interesting thing that's going to happen in this world. And that's why, listen, quarterbacks, I mean, that's what their job is, right? That's what their job is, taking the information that's given to them and being able to solve the problems on the field very, very quickly.
Yeah, to be,
And
be able to process information as an athlete is essentially the single most important attribute of anybody that's in a decision-making role. And that ability to process is something that we identify as a coach and also what we should be teaching. And there's no algorithm to create that can be created that's going to help you process that fast. And that's where, like, that through the Russians call it through the eyes of the coach. They have all this scientific information to train the world's greatest lifters, but it's always the coach, and it's the art of coaching that can take the science behind it and then be able to communicate it to their athletes. And that's the power of a really good coach. And that's what you're talking about. The world is going to be a world that's moving so fast, as you stated, and it's moving that fast in athletics right now. And the AI-driven nature of analytics and what we can do with them is all great. But what is good? What is solid, usable information, and how does it translate into my performance? More importantly, how does it translate into the human interactions that we face every single day? And that's where, as a coach, you have to be adept at understanding the people that you're surrounded by. And there's no computer, there's no AI AI information that's going to help you with the interpersonal relationships that are necessary to be successful in the world we're living in. And that's the world that I think that coaches that are really, really good, they know how to swim in those waters.
Yep.
And when you talk about the coaches, like talking about Danny Hurley or talking about Tony Dungy, they understand who they are, and they're comfortable in their own skin, and they're authentic people. They're
Yes.
originals. I love the idea that God made us in His image, and He made one of a kind. Each one of us is one of a kind. We are all originals, and to be able to accept who you are and accept, like you mentioned, both your strengths and your weaknesses, and minimize your weaknesses and just get stronger at what you are good at. I think those are all critical components of being a really good teacher and a really good communicator, and thus a really good coach. But this is an art, not a science. And, there's so many things involved in it, and it's a fun process. It's a great way to make a living. It's also a hard way to make a living. And like I said at the beginning of the show, it calls you, you don't call it. It's something that you feel like you're being drawn to because you love people. If you love people and you're passionate about something, then coaching can be a way to make a great living and a very rewarding experience.
no doubt. And I think the interaction, like you talked about, you brought up earlier, which is really such a great point for coaches who really want to improve themselves. You coach with guys that knew how to communicate with you, took the time. Like I have mentioned the Mark Duffner thing. I always feel like really there are so many guys that are quote unquote called great coaches that will take the time with you, and there's so many that quote unquote great coaches that do not take the time with you. I have always felt the ones that have taken time out, even if it's a couple of minutes, okay, to show a genuine interest in something that you're either saying or your question or whatever it is, they make a huge impact. The guys who just are like, I am this guy, and don't spend any time, and you mentioned it. I used to always call it the guy who always I've met them 1,000 times. They've recruited my players, okay? Offered him, called me on the phone, please get him down here.
Right.
And when I meet them for the 1,000th time, it's like they're meeting me for the first time.
Right.
And
Right.
and those guys, to me, like I'm like, people might think this guy's a great coach, but I don't think he's as great as everyone else thinks he is, because he's missing something that's really, really important.
Right.
The ability to communicate with somebody.
Right.
I've had this happen because like I talked about before, you talk to a person, you haven't seen them in 10 years. Okay. Maybe a player played for you, right? Yeah, they may have looked completely different. Like I've been shocked by this, right? When I was a young coach, I never thought this could happen. But I'm sure you understand. As you get older, you're like, oh my God, I didn't recognize them. It always drives me nuts when someone doesn't just ask the name again. They're too prideful to say,
Right.
what's the name? What's the name again? As soon as they tell you the name, you'll immediately remember it.
Right.
It's a moment of uncomfortability because the player may think, oh, he doesn't remember me. But then when you tell him his name and you realize you do remember, it's just that you look different. I had this happen when I was at our event in Delaware, Derek. Khalid Rogers, who played at USC, and he used to come to my events. I knew him when he was in high school. Like he was, 15 years old when I saw him, and he was coaching his son's team in like 7-on-7. His son was the same age as my son, but he's much younger than me. I'm an older dad, and he's probably early 30s, maybe, and maybe mid 30s. And he came up to me. I didn't know who it was, and he came over and said hello, and I said hello to him, and I was like, he's like, do you remember me? I said, hey, just what's the name? And he said his name. I said, of course. I said, I didn't recognize you because, you were a high school kid,
Because you grew up.
Later. You're a man, you know what I mean? So I don't want you to take, I said, I didn't want you to take offense to it.
Right.
That I asked for your name because it's been so long for me. And I hadn't seen, I was used to seeing you once or twice a year. So I knew who you were.
Lifetime.
I hadn't seen you in 15 years, so 12 years. So it's a long time. And he was immediately, when he realized I knew who he was, and we had a great conversation. So many people just don't ask that. And it's like, dude, nobody's going to be upset with you because you forgot their name. You haven't seen them in 10 years. Do them the courtesy of asking who they are. Where were you from? Then that usually triggers in their mind, oh, yes, I remember them from that point. And as opposed to the other way, I just think it's such a flaw in coaches who so many people who say are great coaches. They don't take that time and they don't realize that they're actually having an impact on the way people view them. You know what I mean? And they could really take that time. And it doesn't make them a bad or good person.
Right.
It's not about that. It's about they could be a great person. It's just about taking that time to be able to do that. And I think that coaches who do that, and I had to learn to do that myself. Everybody has pride. Everybody thinks, when I was young, my thing used to be I would always remember a name and I would always remember a face. And I have to say, like, once you start to get, I didn't expect this would ever happen to me. But once you start to get 30 years of people getting into your brain, some of it goes way back into the back. It goes way back, So I'd love for you to kind of expand on just things you've learned from that standpoint with yourself over the years, like how you build relationships with players and coaches, things that you thought, wasn't that important that became important to you, those kind of things.
Yeah, I think I love John Wooden's piece of advice that always do something for somebody every day that can't do anything in return for you. And I think that you want to keep that in mind, that you're not doing things for people so that you can have something returned to you. Some kind deed doesn't deserve another kind deed. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And you love the person in front of you without concern for yourself. And so I think that, that's one thing that I'd admonish anybody or encourage anybody to really take a look at when it comes to being a coach. And I would take the person on my team that gets the least amount of attention, and I try to spend some time with that person as much as possible, because that person needs a lot of encouragement. And you don't know, coach, you just mentioned it, the impact that one person can have on another, a mentor can have on a mentee, just by just sheerly showing interest in the person that you're talking to is incalculable. That when you do that, you touch something in another human being that's beyond explanation and that cannot be reproduced in any other way. But that moment of encouragement, that could drive that somebody to something that they never would do without that single moment. And sometimes we look at, there's a piece of scripture, it's back in the Old Testament, And it's when David was anointed to be king by Samuel in the Old Testament, and God said, Samuel said that God sees the inward man, and man sees the outward appearance only. And man sees what's outward, and God sees what's inside the man. And that's what we want to see as coaches. When we see what's inside another human being, and we light that up. When we take a match, we ignite somebody's spirit by how much we care about them. So I would encourage anybody listening to this today to think about that. Is there somebody, if you just do this once a day, it's an incredible gift that you're giving somebody, and you just never know. I always like, I heard Larry Coker. You guys remember the name Larry Coker? He was a national championship coach at University of Miami.
Miami.
I was at a Fellowship of Christian Athletes breakfast at the at the convention one year when he was speaking, and he said this. He said, God knows people you don't know. And sometimes we're almost like angels in the lives of our players. And when we walk into their lives and we give them something that they don't get anywhere else, and that something is called attention and love. And that's what's so amazing about our profession. And that cannot be lost. And that's what makes this different from anything else. When you're in a classroom and you're teaching, and there's going to be somebody in that classroom that needs you more than anybody else in the world, and you're in front of them, and you don't know sometimes who that somebody is.
Nope, most times you don't.
When I would walk into high schools, every time I went out, I love recruiting, because I loved going out, and I get in the car and I go into these different high schools, and I'd be like, well, who am I going to meet today? Who needs me today that I'm going to run into? So if you're really good at listening, and I think that as a coach, you got to be a great listener. You got to be able to listen to the people in front of you. And sometimes they're speaking a language, not with their mouth, but with their heart, with their soul. And you can feel that they're saying, hey, I need you. I need you right now. And you got to be really good at being able to clue into that person that needs you, and then be there for that person when they need you. And, that's another aspect of just meeting people. And sometimes it's a wonderful experience to be blessed and realize that, here you are 30 years removed, and somebody comes up from one of my teammates, and one of the young men that I coached at Iona Prep, and they said, Coach, you don't remember this day, but I remember this day. I remember the day at practice where you grabbed me and told me, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And we were laughing about a story or something, some nature, but it's these moments that we don't think are big deals, but I guarantee you that if you're speaking into the life of a 13 or 14 or 15-year-old, they're listening, and they're listening loud and clear. And you got a chance to be the voice in their life. And so they can drown out all the lies, because there's so many lies that are being told. And the danger of the world we're living in right now is that they're going to believe the lie and not believe the truth. And that's where I keep going back to the truth that's in the Word of God. So I'm hanging on that. And that teaches me how to interact with people in a different way, and gives me a wisdom that only He can give you. And that it's just a powerful tool as a coach.
No doubt. And it's interesting you say that, because I always think our podcast, and I've said this before, and Derek has said this too, the one thing we always fear about our podcast as it's become popular is that we end up only preaching to the choir, meaning the coaches who want to get better, the athletes who want to get better, maybe the parents who want to learn some more things, we'll watch this, and maybe the parents who need more of this, the coaches who need more of this, or the athletes who need more of this do not, you know what I mean? And it's always one of the great fears we have. And it's always, as a parent, and Derek's also a parent, and although his kids are not yet of kind of doing sport, they might be doing some things rolling around, but not doing sports yet.
We're getting there.
Organized sports,
God help us.
but he'll be there soon, and hopefully he learns from all my mistakes that I've made when he goes. So because he's had a bird's eye view. So but it's one of these things where we try to it's very hard for parents to see outside what's immediately in front of them. And I'm included in that. Any parent is, right?
Right.
But a prospective parent will try to see more of the big picture of what their athlete or whatever can eventually do, or who they want them around, or what they want them around. And I'm curious your thoughts from that, Sam, because that's one of the things that I think I've noticed more and more. I'm around a lot of great parents, absolutely no doubt. You know what I mean? So I want to preface it with saying that I personally am lucky most of the time, like kids I coach, or if my son's on the team, I would go so far as to say like 99 out of 100 times. I'm not talking about people get upset or anything like that, but I'm talking about like just in general who they are, been around great, most time great people. But we see it a lot from the outside, where people get um, a lot of things confused with respect to development, raising their kids, and patience is the biggest thing with parents, where they think they know what coaching is, and most of them never coach, you know what I mean, but will point out the flaws in coaching. And I'm not just talking about scheme, I'm talking about like where they put a kid, or positionally, and you have no idea what the coach is actually thinking, right, in the moment, or planning wise, even if the coach communicates that with them, which a lot of times they do. They still are trying to like um manipulate the situation. That's the best way I can put it. And instead of spending time analyzing the big picture, I don't know if there's a better way to put it, but that's kind of my kind of way of, and maybe Derek can chime in which how he might see it. But I'm trying to like figure out, is there a way that we can begin to help them understand that there is a big picture, or is the culture of sports so flawed because of all the other things we kind of talked about that it's going to be very hard to do that in today's world? And I'm saying this, saying that I've been around the overwhelming majority of people I've been around, I've coached, or my kid has been with have been great. You know what I mean? But we see it a lot from the outside. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that, we live in an information age, and we live in a world where people are battling for time, and they're the people that all of us are being inundated with information all the time. So we have to figure out, as teachers and coaches, administrators, how to message what we're doing and how to educate. And the only way to do that is to bring people on board that can work with parents early in the process to educate them about what the process is and to message that properly, and to talk about the core values of a program and talk about the core values of what you're trying to do as a coach. And there has to be a buy-in with the parents. And I always like to preface any question I have when I'm going to develop somebody is like, what do you want to get out of this? What's the end game?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you want to go with this? What's the purpose? Like, I'll be dealing with quarterbacks here, and I'll say, what do you want here? What do you want the end game to be? And I think that's an important question for a parent to honestly answer. What's the end game? Where do you want to end up? Where's the gear of this relationship, of this coaching relationship? And that answer to that question reveals a lot about what the parents really think about what they want you to do with their son. And some of them are living vicariously through their kids, and they will say they're not, but they are. And you can see who they are right away. And I always have said, and recently as I became a parent and raised two girls, that there's some battles that are best fought by your son or daughter and not fought by the parent. And you have to, when you conquer moments in your life as a young person, you become resilient, and you want to be able to conquer something that's difficult, in like being on a team, like being a backup instead of a starter, sitting on the bench and not being the starter, right. Having your best friend score all the points and you don't score any points in that game.
Your role.
And you want to teach them all sorts of things through those experiences. And that's where the parents should be saying, hey, you need to look at it this way. We need to reframe and re-ask questions all the time as both coaches and parents. and we should be asking the right questions to get the right answers. And sometimes we're asking questions that we don't want to get. We're going to get a bad outcome no matter what, because the question is wrong. And we're thinking about things that aren't realistic. For example, the NIL, the average NIL deal in this country now is hovering around, it's somewhere around $21,000 to $23,000. The median income or NIL deal is hovering around $100. So that's what the reality is. Now, we see these athletes that get these millions and millions of dollars, and everybody's thinking they're making all this money. No, nobody's making. Yeah, there's a percentage of people that are making a ton of money. There's also a percentage of people that are making next to nothing. So be aware of all the truth of what you're talking about, and know what you're talking about as a coach. And I think the more that we can message the parents values and core principles and morality that is accepted by everybody as being right. This is right and this is wrong. See, we live in a world where truth is relative now. And because it's relative, your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. And there's got to be certain agreed upons, and there are things that drive our culture that we can say, hey, yeah, this is truly right. And I think that's what's lost in our culture right now. And that's an opportunity to have a discussion and educate and talk and dialogue about these things. And it's very, very hard when you're dealing with a parent whose flesh and blood is in front of you. It's very hard for them to separate that. And they have this bond and this parental bond to that child that you're dealing with and you're coaching, and they're going to see them in a different light than you do. And, for obvious reasons. And believe me, they're there to protect their children, but they're there to protect them from other things sometimes. And sometimes they're protecting them from things they should be allowing that child to experience, so he can learn or she can learn and become more resilient and develop this grit and this toughness that will carry them into life, and that will carry them through into the difficult moments when they have a family and they're fired and they need to go get a job and they need to pick themselves up, and they experience quote unquote failure. And what do you do as football coaches or coaches? Anybody can succeed. We got to teach our players, what do you do when you fail? What happens when you fail?
Right, because you're going to do that a lot more than you're going to succeed.
Correct.
And to get through
100%. 100%. Yeah.
Right. And it goes back to where, and we talked about this earlier, right? Where, and I don't want to cut you off, Coach, but we go back to this era of where we've only worried about feelings and making sure that no one ever went through anything difficult. And now you have a generation that can't handle any level of letdown or disappointment or not being first or being the winner or not getting something for whatever. We've just overall rewarded everything and every type of behavior, where consequences have not been even formulated into this whole picture. And now you have a generation that cannot handle that, right? And look, Coach Schumann and I, we see it. It's turning a little bit, right? And you start to see some of those things coming back and with whatever. But for the most part, like, that's really what it came down to, was like, we never allowed anyone to fail. And dealing with those are part of it, right? Like, growing up, there is disappointment that happens, and that's part of learning to be a part of this world. And life itself is you're gonna have a lot of disappointments, right? And those disappointments are what make the positives that much better. They're more rewarding because they don't always come. So you're working for it because you want to feel that almost euphoric feeling of winning the job when you were the backup, going through, putting in all the work, and then it works out for you. Those are things that they don't happen anymore, because we're so quick to, when something goes wrong, point a finger and blame, or turn and jump to another school, or transfer, or quit altogether and give up on something because it's hard. The hard's what makes it great. That's why the sport of football is it's unbelievable. Everybody can find a role and help in the grand scheme of things. That's what separates football from everything else, is not everybody's going to be the guy that throws the touchdown or the guy that scores all the points, but you could be one of the linemen that allowed that to happen. and that you see that culture. It's really difficult to kind of get all of those guys to buy in. And that's what separates football. It's because it's the ultimate team sport where you're trying to get 11 guys to do things at a high level in order to be positive and win a game. And some of that's kind of gone away. And as a coach, it's difficult to guide those guys and, hey, like, this is for the good of the group. And, it's not really about you or whatever. But at the same time, understand that that's where they're coming from, right? Like, that's how they've been raised. Mom and dad has told them they're the best, thing, and they're the best player and they should get the ball more. And your coach doesn't know shit and all this other stuff that we deal with when parents used to be that support system to kind of hammer home on, hey, your coach knows what he's talking about, right? Like this, you listen to him no matter what. Now it's the opposite, right? I saw it in teaching. It's why I got out of teaching, right? It was no longer was it, why did my kid fail your class? It was, well, you failed my kid. Well, I don't know. Let's take a look here. So it's really difficult. Go ahead, Coach.
No, I one comment quickly on what you just said. I think that my concern is you're driving really good people out of education and out of these jobs because it's become almost impossible job because nobody can meet these expectations. And there's so many shareholders and so many people involved in what you're doing now that it becomes almost impossible for the coach to function, and that's
right.
And people are all aware of that.
And the coach used to be the one that was like you looked at him and, okay, that's his world. He's really good at that. So I trust in him to do these things that for me as a parent, like that's not my world, right? Now with social media or just access to information, everybody thinks they could be a coach. Everybody thinks they could call plays. Everybody thinks they could train their kid and get them bigger, stronger, faster. Everybody has a better way of doing things. And we've also now with social media, like now there's a platform for all of these voices to go out and be there. And it's, it's almost like you used to have to, when you were writing a paper, you had to fact check where you were getting your information from. Well, now everybody just spews out whatever it is. And people are confused as to what's real, what's not real, what is true, what is not true, right? Like it's just this chaotic world of everything. Go ahead, Dave.
And that's why resilience, you talked about resilience and being able to be resilient and being able to adapt as a human being in your environment and being able to obviously overcoming adversity is very important, but being resilient and being adaptive. And Derek's heard me talk about this. Like my son in basketball was used to being, because he's always playing in his age range, used to being like best player, one of the best players on the teams he plays on. And he goes to a Catholic school, and they have a fifth, sixth grade team, and he's a fifth grader. Okay, and he makes the team, and they had a philosophy that was a little different in today's world. Okay, is that for the most part they're going to play sixth graders unless they were lacking as the main players, unless they were lacking a guy. But in this particular grade, they didn't lack it. They had good sixth graders, right? So even if two guys are close, they're going to play a sixth grader, right? And they kind of had like a little bit of an old school like seniority thing to it. You know what I mean? And my son wasn't used to that first. They also do something that normally, like me and Derek talked to a lot of speed guys. Like we're very big on like become very big on like making sure you front load that stuff and performance wise. And they still do old school gassers, right? And my son kind of knows the way that I teach speed, right? And that's pretty much not what we do in our football. We try to front load everything. And he was perplexed by that at first. And so I show up at a practice. It must have been like the second or third practice. He made the team. That wasn't ever an issue. But I saw him like kind of like cruising in the gassers. And I already knew kind of the philosophy of the playing time thing. And as soon as you're done, he's the first guy out of practice, runs out of there. And is annoyed. And I'm like, what's the problem? He's like, we're just running to run, blah, 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 blah. I said, well, you're not running that hard. And he was like, well, because he's heard me talk about what I believe in, what I'm saying? Nothing to do with these coaches, but like what I believe in, as far as speed. And he's like, we're just running to run. I said, let me explain something to you. It doesn't matter what my philosophy is about speed development or what my personal philosophy of playing, who to play. Like I'm kind of like me and Derek have always been like, I don't care if you're a freshman or senior, best guy plays. That's like kind of how we've always kind of been. We've now developed really like I was always a track guy, but we always developed this. Now we kind of have so many speed guys. We're kind of more towards this world where you performance driven. You don't try to wear these guys out, the kind of
Right.
thing. Gone
That's
away
right.
from that.
Right.
I said, here's how it works. If you want to play more and you want the coaches to recognize you, you better be leading it every sprint or giving your all to whatever your all is, meaning if second, that's second, in the sprints, whatever that is. You're running as fast as you can in every sprint. And he's like, well, the fastest kid on the team, they have a kid that's really, really fast. Fastest kid on the team, he jogs all the sprints. And he's a sixth grader, right?
Mm-hmm.
I said, that's not your situation. You have to impress these coaches, and you have to try and lead every sprint. And he had a hard time with the playing time thing and let me tell you something. It was the greatest season he ever had. Once he learned that he was a sub off the bench, he did phenomenal when he went in. You could see he was really good. The coaches saw he was really good. Okay, they have it tucked in his brain for next year when he becomes a sixth grader. He scored a ton of points in the time he got in. He did really well. He passed the ball, did all the things you're supposed to do. He learned to do what the coaches expected of him, which was very, very different, very, very different than what, very, very different than what we, may have discussed before. And he became, from that standpoint, someone who learned to do what the coaches expected and thrived, completely thrived in that environment. And he shifted his mindset. And I thought, you know what? Most parents, like obviously I'm a coach, so I understand that coaches are different. You got to adapt to what the coaches want. Okay. If you want to play, you're going to have to adapt to what the coaches want. It doesn't matter what mommy and daddy's philosophy is. It doesn't matter what mommy and daddy thinks about anything. It matters what your coaches expect of you. And he learned that. And now he completely thrived. And now he's playing baseball with a different coach. And this guy's philosophy is the best guys play, right? But he's taken what he learned in basketball with him to everything that this school is doing. And he's doing it all the time. And I'm very tough on him. And sometimes I'm over the top. But he's learned resilience from that standpoint. And I think that has to happen more with parents. You got to let them understand that you're going to have to do what the coaches expect of you if you want to have an opportunity to succeed within that program. Whether it's this year or 5 years, whatever it is, you have to do that. And if you approach it that way, you will have the opportunity for success. And also knowing that even if you do that, the coach may think someone else is better than you. These things aren't a slam dunk, but you will feel a lot better about yourself as an athlete if you go ahead and do the things that are expected of you and you try to do them to the best of your ability, because you'll walk away better. You'll walk away better in that sport, and you'll walk away better because you've realized that you can do it. What the other guy expects you to do, you can reach to his expectations. Because if you go to what mom and dad just think all the time, then you're just jumping around. Like we talked about before, you're jumping around. Well, this guy doesn't do things the way mom and dad thinks it should be done. You're jumping around here. You learn from other people. Dad might do things this way when he coaches. This guy over here may do things that way. This guy over here may do things that way. And you know what? They may all be good. They just might be different. And that's an important thing that I thought he learned. I thought it goes to what you're talking about. The resilience part of sports is so important. And when they learn that, what you said goes with them into everything that they do in life, because life is very, very difficult. I'll let you have a couple of words on that. And then I also would love and Derek might want to ask a couple questions. Quarterback development. I'd love, before we let you go, I want to
Sure.
hear about what you do from a quarterback development standpoint.
Yeah, just for one point that you just made that I think is really good is you just set a foundation for leadership with your son. If your son is going to do things the right way, and that being the way he's asked to do them, and be a leader on the team and the leader in terms of culture on the team, and he's going to do it irregardless of what is given to him, then he's showing everybody around him what it looks like to be a team firster and to be a quality member of a team. And that's what you want. And that also leads to leadership. And people around you notice people that do things well all the time. And when I say well, they do things with attention to detail. They do things with high effort. They do things because it's the right thing to do in that environment. They do it as hard as they can. And again, you're growing a leader when you see somebody like that. People resonate with that idea, and they're attracted to people that do that. And that's where you get your team leaders in life. You know, that those kind of people end up being great leaders. And once they learn that lesson, that's a great story in coaching right there. You know, and you just gave us a good example of that. Now the outcome is, you know, produced by the fact that there's a hard lesson that was learned in the story that you just told. And there's got to be a lot of hard lessons in life to take a deep dive into our character and to grow in our character. It doesn't happen when things are going right. It happens when things are going wrong. And that's what's so wonderful about sports and so terrible at the same time is there's a little bit of both all the time. And you just can't underscore what you just said about that. And I don't know which direction you want to go in right now with the quarterbacks, or Derek, do you have any questions for me before we get going?
No, Coach, you just kind of hammered home how I've always looked at coaching is, you know, you win with people, you win with relationships. Once your players understand that you care about them on a different level other than just, you know, how many touchdowns you could throw or how many, you know, tackles you could make, when you kind of show that you're vested in them, you know, as more than the just a player or a statistic or something that you're using to kind of get you to your level, right? Like once they have that level of comfort with you and they understand that you care on that level, like they're willing to run through a wall for you. And that's, you know, like you referenced before, like when those guys, you know, graduate and go on and do whatever they're going to do, because especially coaching high school, like majority of them don't go on to play at the next level, right? And that's not the goal of it, right? But when you see that, you know, they're up for a job or you know, they message you or you get invited to their weddings or do some of those things, like you really know that you made that impact. And you know, I've always prefaced that with fellas, like you might not like me right now, but understand I'm doing this out of a place of love and that I care about you on so much more of a level other than just winning football games. Like I'm trying to make you good men, good humans, good citizens, good husbands, fathers, work, you know what I mean? Like employees. And you might not see it right now, but down the road, you're going to look back because I did the same thing. Right. You know, and that's just how I've always approached it. So to hear it, you know, kind of, you know, you kind of solidify that for me personally, you know, really kind of hits home. In switching to the quarterback aspect, Coach, because you've been around some good ones. You've obviously coached at the highest level with it in regards to it. Just what's your overall philosophy when it comes to coaching the position itself? Because there's so many guys out there that, you know, are quarterback coaches and, you know, I've done that. We do this and we do that. Right. So just what are some of your general philosophies in the approach to coaching the quarterback and kind of maybe even some of like the mechanics or things that you kind of look at in that retrospect?
Well, I think first off, as a general philosophy, I think that the position of quarterback demands the development of fundamentals and techniques and skills related to playing quarterback. So you want to get off to a really good start. You want to build a foundation the way you build a house, and you want to build the foundation really deep, and you want to make sure it's really wide and it's really broad and can hold a lot of weight. If we have a great foundation in terms of skill and technique and fundamental development, then we can hang a lot on that as a coach. And I want to increase the trainability level of all the players that I'm coaching as they get older so that they can, if they're talented enough and they have the genetics and they have the character and they can process, that they can move to the highest level of their ability and their talent level. And it's one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult position in any sport that
doubt.
you can imagine. And I really believe it is the most difficult, in my opinion. So you're
I
dealing
agree.
with
I
with an
thoroughly
athlete-
agree.
with an athlete that has to process information, has to throw a football on time and rhythm. So personally, my philosophy is that you've got to develop, good mechanics first as a young quarterback. And developing good mechanics means just that. It means learning how to throw with your body, being as like, I'm going to quote Tom House on this, being aggressive with your body, easy on your arm. So we're as quarterbacks, my philosophy is you're a rotational athlete. So I'm going to develop you as a rotational athlete, and I'm going to work an incredible amount on the weight transfer process, and you developing a timing and a rhythm between the separation of your shoulders and your hips. And I'm going to try to teach you the fundamentals of the finish and the follow through, and talk through that carefully. And the position of quarterback is about learning footwork and mechanics. So there's a combination of skills that have to be taught very early and very often. I think that your arm has a shelf life, and that you have to manage the training load of the quarterback or pitcher. I would say pitching and playing quarterback are very similar in that regard, is that as a young quarterback, you want to make sure that your arm and your body, they get stronger together. So you got to be able to, as a quarterback coach, my philosophy is I want to integrate my flexibility program, my shoulder stability program, my strength program in the weight room, the way that I throw the ball. Everything is going to be integrated into the mechanics of the quarterback position. I'm going to spend a lot of time on increasing mobility and flexibility and strength. And I want that to be functional strength. So I'm really going to be as a quarterback coach, I should be good at understanding how I can use the weight room, what exercises are really important, what are not. I want to develop in young quarterbacks, I want to develop general physical preparedness, just like any athlete. So I want them to have a good conditioning base and strength base. And I want them to appreciate what the weight room can do to protect them and protect their arm and to develop them as a player. And, that has to take place a little bit later on in their career, say like, after 12, 13. But I think that what's become so complicated about this particular position is they're starting out earlier and earlier doing it, and they're using their arm sometimes in the wrong way. And you encounter a lot of drill work where a lot of these quarterback coaches that are getting them on the side are drilling these off-platform throws, and which are super important, by the way. And I believe the vast majority of your time has to be spent throwing the ball where you got to regain your profile or regain your balance to throw the ball. And those are the resets and the avoids, as I call them. But, if you do too much of that, you're going to hurt your arm. And you've got to have in your approach, my approach as a quarterback, training them, you've got to monitor the load, as I've already stated, and you've got to be able to have both hard and easy days. When you're working a high intensity day, throwing a lot of balls, or you're throwing hard, that has to be followed by a day off or recovery. And they got to have to learn the art of arm care. So that's a whole nother window that you got to open up, in terms of your skill set as a quarterback coach. And that means, like, obviously the things like ice and recovery. And, so you always want to be reading it. You want to work hard, but you want to recover hard. And recover hard, means that I've got to sleep, I got to eat right, and I got to practice the basic fundamentals of nutrition and recovery, and all that's built into this position. This is the age of information. Well, so much of it is useful if you know how to use it. So you're really going to have to, if I'm a quarterback, I'm going to be super proactive and trying to find out who can I go to integrate all these different things. So the longer I've done this, the more like I spend my time thinking about, like a macro plan for my athlete. Where do I want to see him in 4 years? And then there's a micro plan, like, what are we going to do this week? Or what are we going to do this year? What's this year look like in your development? And I like to, having been somebody who loves the weight room and the physical preparedness part of it, I want to make sure that I understand the concept as a coach of periodization. So I know that I can't peak my athletes I can't hold a peak for that long. So you have to know as a quarterback coach,
Great
what
point.
are you trying to accomplish at this time of year? So
Right.
I think you should have a plan. as a quarterback coach is my philosophy is that I want a macro plan, but I want to plan what do I want to do throughout each stage of the year in my development, and that encompasses, like I just said, fundamental work, footwork, that your what we call your drops and your launch point, and the way that you set your feet and the way you use your feet and transfer your weight. Those are all things that can be done year round. And the more you do that skill development, by the way, that's not intense work. That's low intensity. When I'm throwing the ball, and I'm drilling what we call wind post, I'm throwing deep post over the top or deep takeoffs that are 44-yard throws, caught on the sideline, over the top of the shoulder of a receiver. Those are intense throws where you have to, again, if you have good mechanics, you're going to throw forever, you're going to recover quickly. If you have anything off on your mechanics, then you're going to risk injury and you're going to get tired faster and you're not going to be able to train as hard. So that's why I'm going to go back to the fundamentals and train in fundamentals so you have good finish, good recovery, right? You're using your entire body, and my personal philosophy is you have a very efficient, quick throwing motion where you're throwing with your body and you're learning how to use the weight transfer process properly in the throwing motion. And I've been influenced heavily by Tom House, and now we have modalities that can study your motion to find out if it's the most efficient, and you're getting all the vectors, as we like to say, going in the direction of the target. I also think that one of the things that most quarterbacks don't understand is if you want to be truly great, you have to be truly accurate. So you have to train accuracy and targeting from the moment that you get a quarterback. And that has a lot to do with your eyes, and it has a lot to do with what you're doing with, as Tom House talks about, the equal and opposite component of your muscles and anatomy. And you have to be able to have dynamic balance where you can grab your platform and you can keep your balance when you're running and you're moving to throw the ball on the run. But you got to be able to understand these mechanics to save your arm and to preserve your arm, and also become incredibly accurate. So accuracy is created with your eyes and with your finish and follow through. And one of the components to being a truly NFL elite player is they just don't miss. They don't miss. I mean, I tell this story all the time. Kevin Coyle, who was with the Bengals, he was with me at Holy Cross and then at Maryland and all, who I respected greatly, great defensive coordinator. He was at the Bengals. I was finishing up at Toledo, going to Clemson, and Bruce Krakowski was our record-setting quarterback at Toledo, and Lance Moore were having their pro day. And both were going to have future NFL careers, by the way. And Kevin said this. He went to watch practice to evaluate both of them. And he said, Robbie, he called me up right away, right after workout. He said, Coach Spence, he says, the ball was not on the ground one time.
Absolutely. I think that's something that coaches look, everybody, he could throw it really hard, or, this guy can get that. If and look, honestly, I will my foundation in this, it comes from being in the run and shoot, I saw guys be extremely successful at the quarterback position that did not have the biggest arms. Now, I played with some of those guys, and don't get me wrong, they were really good too. But the guys that just had the most success were guys that knew when and where to throw the ball. And it was because it went back to their fundamentals. It went back to the mechanics. It went back to these little things and they weren't the most athletic guys. If you were walking down the street and said that guy's the quarterback, you'd be like, there's no way that's the quarterback. But it was. And they were very good at knowing when and where to throw the ball. And it was always where it needed to be when it needed to be. And that was just so important when it came to that.
Not to interrupt you, but you mentioned this in your comments, and that's what I was getting to, is the processing ability. To be great, you have to process. And to be great, you have to know where the ball is going to go and get it there on time. And anticipation is extremely important. And throwing the receiver open is an art. And that to me is something you kind of identify an individual early. And those are the guys that become great. And the more you train, the better you train, the more you understand, the more you integrate your actual playbook mechanics and what you're doing in the classroom with what you're doing on the field. And that's where the quarterback trainer should be integrating the classroom to the field. And any drill that you do as a quarterback coach should simulate what happens in 11-on-11 football. So that's where I would go to, like, how do you drill? What is the purpose of the drill that you're drilling? When I do an avoid drill, when I do a reset drill, when I do a scramble drill, I want to make sure that that drill actually shows up in game footage and it has application. Then when I see it show up, I want to show the player, hey, this is our drill. This is our foundational drill that we do in this particular area. And, I love what Bruce Arians, who, in the book, The Quarterback Whisperer, he says, and I use this phrase I stole from him, the 50-50 rule. That means 50% of the time, something's going to go wrong. That means 1 out of every 2 plays, something's going to break down where you're going to have to move your throwing point. So you're going to have to move your feet. You're going to have to reset. You're going to have to establish your platform again, or reestablish your platform, or you're going to have to avoid and throw on the run. And that's where you're training those off-platform throws, and you're teaching the quarterback, can you manage that moment? And that's where the mental strength component comes in. And that's another facet of my philosophy is, like, as a coach, I have to be teaching my athlete what mental strength is. I have to show them how to develop it, and I have to have a way to coach that. And I should be very intentional as a coach to have a plan to develop them mentally and develop their mental toughness. There's no position in any sport where you have to be mentally tougher than a quarterback.
No doubt. Yeah. And look, we've said it on the show, and Dave understands. Like,
no doubt.
I've said this a million times. Like, to me, it's the hands down hardest position
No doubt.
all of sports. Like, there's just so much on it. You know what I mean? Like, you're just responsible for so much. All eyes are on you at all times. Yeah. I mean, it's
all these kids want to play it, and they
and every parent wants their kid to be that person, but I don't think they understand the intent.
An arm doesn't make you a quarterback.
Doesn't make it. Just because your size, your measurables,
make you a quarterback. These are all pieces of it, but it's up here.
The full package.
And developing really it up here. Because they got to be able to. Quarterbacks have to be able to process, obviously, information, be able to communicate, all those kind of things. They also got to be able to handle tough times. And be able to handle when it completely doesn't go their way, because everybody wants to play quarterback until they throw 3 interceptions.
Or until until somebody comes off the edge and nobody picks them up and they take one in the face, right? And then how do you handle that?
When they get up, do they get up? Do they? Are
you pointing fingers?
Are they willing to get back in there and throw again? Like, it's interesting because I coached so many quarterbacks in high school for so many over the years that have had a lot of success, and I thought I always had a good grasp as to what it would make a high school quarterback successful. I'm not saying they would be college quarterbacks, but what would make a high school quarterback successful, no matter whether they could run better, throw better, whatever it was. Like, there was a certain things that came with them, even though they're all different, but there were certain things that were similar. And one of the big things was, of the ones that were most successful, were their ability when it went bad to be able to come back.
Right.
And it didn't mean they were going to win that game. Okay. It might've went bad a whole game. It happens sometimes. But most of them were able to stop the bleeding, but sometimes they didn't stop the bleeding, or they struggled that whole game. But did they come back that next Monday and be able to go and want to figure it out and improve off of that? And when and handle that adversity, because those guys always, I thought, had a chance. And I think that the guys who could not do that, who would sit there, and let's say they threw 3 interceptions and just wanted to be like, this guy's fault or that guy. And then sometimes kids are like that, but when you explain to them it was their decision, okay, and they can't accept it, like when they can't accept that it was their decision and it was okay that they made a bad decision and now they need to fix that thing immediately, right? Like, that's okay. When the ones who were able to grasp that concept had the best chances to succeed at the high school level. Now, college is even more important. Pro, it's even more important, and it's even more. You have to be able to do it maybe quicker, more resiliently, maybe immediately in that drive, whatever. But that ability to do that and be able to just be like, okay, you know what, like, may have hit the receiver's hands. It may, all these things, but I have to be able to own what I can get them to do better next time and coach them if I need to as a quarterback. Like, I've got to be able to do that. I've got to be able to pick them up as a receiver. I've got to be able to, even though I'm incredibly upset with myself because I didn't do something right, be able to fix it so the players understand that I'm with them, right? And I think those things are so important. And I'm a big believer in that it has to continue to be developed. And then there becomes a point that there are obviously certain guys that are better than others. And those are the guys that you go with, and the other ones have to find a different position. But you continue to develop that. And I think parents are the biggest drivers of kids playing quarterback now.
Oof.
And I think that the biggest thing that parents miss on this, and I'd love for you to touch on, like, if they could grab a few things, like, hey, how can I identify if my kid is continuing to improve as a quarterback, as a parent, like really improve? But I think what parents are missing is, my kid has a big arm, he should play quarterback, or my kid can run and has a big arm and can move real well, and he should be quarterback. When the second that you get on them or correct them, they're immediately going to fight you on that correction, right? And even if they do fight you the first time, a kid who could be a quarterback will learn to not fight you on that and to figure it out, right? Parents need to understand those certain things if their kid wants to be a quarterback, because otherwise, the truth is, there's a lot of great positions in football, and if the kid's, you're trying to make him a quarterback, that probably means he can play another position because he's probably smart. He's probably already smart. He's probably already pretty athletic if you're trying to make him a quarterback because you saw dollar signs. And my thought process is, as you develop him as young as a quarterback, you should also let him play other positions.
Yeah,
You never know what's going to happen down the line. You
that's
never
true.
know if they get that true resiliency that's needed as a quarterback. And if you're playing them at quarterback, they probably can play other positions. So I'd love for you to touch on some of that stuff. And then we could close from there,
Yeah, in closing, like one of the things I would say is, like, just in general, this position, I want to find somebody that's a multi-sport athlete. So if you're a parent and you are thinking that your son's going to be quarterback, then he probably is playing point guard, or he's playing something like that. He might be playing attack.
Shortstop.
He's playing shortstop. He is turning double plays. They're in the RPO game today.
Oh,
That's
what
the
is that?
quarterbacks
Like,
become.
it's the
So,
whole freaking thing.
yeah, so
Golly.
don't think that this is going to happen. If you're so myopic as a parent and athlete, and you reduce yourself to just a quarterback at a very young age, you're really limiting yourself, and you're not
Absolutely.
really having the competitive experience of playing the other sports. And there's so much learning that's done, and so much processing that's done in these other sports that are so important. And, I can go on and on about that. And I think that my argument has always been, and it continued, this is something that I became a true believer of because I saw it and I saw the result. When I recruited quarterbacks that had played other positions and played, point guard, like, for example, Bruce Kukowski, I was talking about, the night that I offered him a scholarship to go to Toledo. We were the only school that offered him, by the way. He played in the NFL 11 years. I went to watch him play basketball.
Yeah.
He took, I think he might have taken like 10 or 11 3-point shots that night. He hit 6. And I saw that this guy's hand-eye coordination, it was unbelievable. He had ice in his veins. He didn't get phased. I saw the basketball coach ripped him. It's like it never happened. And I was like, I watched him over and over again. He just handled things that night, and I could see the speed at which he could make decisions. And I was like, that's my guy. And I've always found it to be an advantage, not a disadvantage, if I'm recruiting a guy who's used to being in competitive environments and thrives on the competitiveness of it. If you just want to play quarterback and you don't play other games and grow up playing other games, it is extremely doubtful that you'll ever be a high quality quarterback. And I'll say that over and over again. And I'm even talking in the age of where we've gotten so sophisticated and we're so into the nuances of a sport that we dive in and say, oh, my son can only play this or my daughter can only do this because it's so competitive. So she's just got to focus all on this. We got to find a way not to make the world like that, because we're really in effect, we're going to burn them out. And that's proven to be true. We're burning them out at an earlier in age, and they're not getting the joy and the satisfaction out of the sport that they should be getting. Somebody else is maybe getting some kind of joy and some kind of like off kilter feelings about, their son or daughter playing, but they're not enjoying the process. So I just would encourage people to just keep looking at that. And then the last thing I would say is on the mental aspect, as you coach these kind of athletes, when you're talking about quarterbacks, they should have a competitive journal where they start to learn how to write about their competitive experience and keep it with them and take notes on all the mental aspect of, like, how did I feel? What is my mental approach? What will be my reset mechanism if I make a mistake? I need to be coached like that. I need to have specific ways in which I can reset my mind to get back in the zone, to get back into a position where I can actually make a play again after I make a mistake. And all these things are processes that we learn and we train along the way. And I have to keep record of what I'm learning. And I'm a really big proponent of writing my experience down and keeping a competitive journal. I write every single morning just because I write in my quiet time, but in my prayer time. But I believe it to be true. All my quarterbacks kept what we call a competitive journal. And we wrote down whatever we were learning. And I gave them things that would help increase the ability to withstand the pressures of the game. And when they had moments that we called teaching moments or learning moments, we identified those together. And we said, well, what did you learn from this? What will you do next time, given this situation? And all those experiences together make for a great player. And it's a culmination of those experiences and how I will understand my personal narrative and how I undress that and how I understand myself that makes me the better athlete, that makes me the better player, that makes me able to perform at the highest level. And I'm telling you, I've coached 5 NFL quarterbacks and countless others, been the best in their conference. And all the great ones, they have these kind of characteristics, and they did not come without hard labor, without hard work. I love what T.S. Eliot said. He said, tradition is not inherited, it's obtained through hard work. And that's so true. You can't inherit anything. These things are grabbed over a period of time. And as a coach, and I'll end with this, I think you got to enjoy the journey that you're on. I'm guilty of not doing that. I've been at the biggest of the big, and I've had some experiences that anybody would want to have, and I've been blessed. And I sometimes look back and say, I didn't enjoy that enough, and I didn't enjoy the journey. And I was sometimes anxious to do things that were way out in front of me instead of just taking advantage of what I talked about earlier, the moment and the day that God gave me that in that moment. So, as an athlete and a coach, we need to enjoy our journey, and we need to learn from each and every experience and enjoy that process of being around the people that we're in front of.
No doubt. So well said. We learned a ton today. I guess I'll speak for myself. I learned a ton today from you. Really, really unbelievably enjoyable. One of the fastest 2 hours I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
I can't believe it's been 2 hours and 10 minutes almost.
I know.
Wow.
One of the fastest 2 hours of my life. It really was an enjoyable experience, and learning from you and your wisdom and all the things that you learned over the years. And it's really been great having. I can't thank you enough for coming on today.
You're welcome. Thanks a bunch.
Coach,
I appreciate you guys. You're doing a great job. You're doing a great job with your show. It's been an honor to be on it. Thanks so much.
Coach, if we can ever do anything for you, please reach out. Let us know. Please. Keep us updated as to some next moves and where you're at and whatnot, and we'll stay in touch. And listen, really appreciate all the wisdom, the knowledge. If it looked like I was looking off, it's because I got about 2 pages of notes here to go through and kind of, go through and whatnot. But I really appreciate you taking the time. Oh, you're most welcome. It's been my pleasure. Believe me, it's been really fun. Okay. Thanks, Coach. Talk soon. Take care. Have a good day. All right, Coach. Enjoy that Tennessee home, huh? Enjoy that Tennessee home. Yeah. I am. Enjoy. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye. All right. Take care. Bye-bye. Man, that was good stuff, man. I got to thank you for having him on. That was phenomenal. I had no idea where it would take us, but as always with the podcast, that's what's great about it. When you leave it loose and open-ended, and when you get guys that have done so many different things, like it's just whatever way, because whatever way they're going to take it, they're going to be passionate about it and share a lot about, you know what I mean? So he's obviously at a state right now where, the philosophy of everything, and being where you're at and all those kind of things are really important to him. And just the almost like the lifeline and the essence of what coaching really is, kind of what goes into it and how he's been able to do that and navigate that world, at the highest of levels and some other levels in this area here or that place there. Like, I don't know. I love talking to guys that have been at different places, and they
you're
have
hired and fired, and you're hired and fired,
and they're living the life of the dribs and the throws, and then like to just for who he is, obviously as a person, right? I attest to that too, because you're talking about a guy who's lifelong work, and now he's making a move for his wife, right? Like towards that's just, to me, that's a guy that I want my kid to go play for. You know what I'm saying? Or I want to know the intangibles of what goes into him and who he is, because that's somebody I'd like to emulate. And I like to think of myself more on that side of it, where bigger picture and all those other things. And, just a really good conversation with a guy who's done it at the highest of the levels. Have to talk to him about getting him back on to talk some actual real QB and all those kind of things, if he's available, because I'd love to pick his brain, obviously.
I think he would,
as a run and shoot guy. Oh, definitely. But I just really
I think you should get him on and say we'll talk some more X's and O's. We got the philosophy and
I love that part, right? And I really think that's something now that you're hearing it from a high level. So our viewers, parents, coaches, this is what it's about, man. You know what I'm saying? This is what makes it tick, and this is what the best of the best do. And this is really
Bastion's driving this. I would have never thought when we started this that we'd end up driving home much more of
right,
some more of these philosophical things,
right? The bigger picture stuff, man. You know what I mean? Like the stuff that when people think of sports, or they think of, you know what I mean? They don't think of this side of it, right? But I think it's important. He literally talked about coaching the mental side of, the position itself, or, coaching up the recovery aspect of it. To look at that, right?
Or even how a coach is
their approach to it.
So hard for it's so. I think athletes are fairly resilient on that, but I think parents have a hard time for the exact reasons he outlined.
And again, he referenced it too. Parents are always going to struggle with some of these things because their kid is the most important thing. And it's almost like you have blinders on, right? Whereas I think a coach who has kids has that perspective, and they understand the good ones.
You're better at it. You're never perfect, but you're much better. You're definitely better
at the aspects of
trying to look
things.
at the whole picture.
Correct. I understand why
he doesn't do this great,
or I understand why this parent is upset, or
you
know what I mean. Okay, maybe that approach might have worked with this, but it's not going to work with this, right? So
I've been an assistant as like basketball, for example. The guy I coached with, I was his assistant. I thought overall he did a great job, but what he was great at? He was great at teaching basketball. Really, really great at teaching basketball. In game, I would probably be a better in-game basketball coach, and he's much better than I could ever hope to be on the basketball. So he's learning the in-game part, right? Which I could help him with because I was assistant, and he was somewhere where I am not. Obviously, I didn't play, outside of intramurals. So he knows the ins and outs of basketball. When he's teaching things, I'm taking notes, dude. Right. I'm taking, whether it's mental notes or I'm taking notes. I'm like, okay, I should do this drill with my kid. I should do this is really good stuff. I got to teach him this, So my point is to say, I got to take the totality of the coach. Overall, I'm this was a great experience because he learned a lot from this guy. Now, St. Leo's was a different experience. Right. Those guys taught you structure. They taught you this is what a high school program is going to look like.
Right. So
Okay.
be prepared
You
when
got
you
to
get
do
there.
things the way that we want them done, not how your
Right.
parents think it should be done, not
Right.
how.
Yeah, no,
So
that's not how it
totally
works.
different experience, also a great experience, right? So
Everything,
you
you're going
got
to get something from everything. That's always just how I looked at it, right? Like every
that's what
coach
it
is going to
is.
bring something, and it might be good, bad, or indifferent, right? Because I mean, I just look at my college experience, right? Like my DC didn't recruit me, so I wasn't really his guy. The corners coach wasn't a fan of me because of like I didn't meet his measurables. Yet I had a safety coach that saw me as like, man, this kid can play. I don't give a shit about anything else. He's the guy. And he would stand on a pedestal and he would fight for my ass like no other. And just that belief in me on that other level, right? And the fuel that those other guys kind of being like naysayers were, that just added fuel to the fire. But without a coach that presented it, or like 3 different coaching styles, right? 2 of the 3 didn't work, yet it still worked out because I had that one guy that I could go to and be like, hey, and that would be real with me. Like, hey, you got to do this, this, and this because these guys think this, this, and this of you. I don't put as much weight into what they do. I look at you as you're up here because this is the categories that I coach with or I judge you as, right? Like, and then all of that stuff that goes into it. But without coaches that were different, and look, and I love all of them the same now, right? Because it's like, even though they were tough and it was whatever, like you took something from it. And now it helped me in my life and all the other side
Yep.
things that have nothing to do with us going 9-2 as a senior in college, right? Or being the second leading tackler on the team, like as a senior, or honorable mention all conference bullshit. You know what I mean? Like none of that shit matters. We remember it. It's fun. But the stuff that made me like who I am now all goes back to coaches that I had. And every single one of them coached a different way. You know what I'm saying? And it just is what it is.
There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. It's incredible. You don't know what's going to help you. I didn't know that. I always wanted to, I was a good running back. I always wanted to be a running back. That was always but thank goodness Mario Alley played me at safety in high school, because who would have known that I would have ended up playing in college on the defensive side of the ball?
100%.
And if I just played running back only, okay, and never played defense ever, I might, if things failed on the offensive, meaning we changed coaches, when they changed coaches, and now
Things happen.
coach was not a huge fan of me as a fullback, and I was the starter there. Now I wasn't his guy. It's just, and if I didn't play safety in high school, I wouldn't have known that I could tackle well
No
and
doubt,
go
dude.
over play linebacker and be confident to take my chances. I would have been stuck on the bench. Okay. I would have been
Damn straight.
pigeonholed, stuck, and angry, right?
Look,
And
if
you
I
know
had
what?
never played every special teams in high school, be on every team in high school, that I would have never made the bus when I got to
Right.
Sacred Heart. You know what I'm saying? I would have never been able to help that team or impact them. And it was always approached that way too. Like, it's for the good of the group. Now, whether that's because we came, I don't know, personally, like I don't want to speak for you, but coming from a small school, it always had to be about the team. It wasn't about you.
Right.
Look, we all know, and look, my coaches were very open.
Your
with like,
team was
yo,
better than my teams, but
right. But they were,
they were still,
but they always
were good guys,
look,
though.
they
They were
knew
hard as
too.
hell. They were tough, like sometimes
Absolutely.
mean.
But to
But
me
they were
too,
good
they
guys.
also they also made it different. Like, hey man, like I just want you to know, right? Like we understand where you're at in comparison to everybody else around on this team. You know what I mean? But listen, you're not going to get treated any different. We're going to actually probably be harder on you because you're the rarity here. So you know what? This is why they were very good at expressing why they were doing things before people did that, right? Because back then it was kind of just I tell you and you do, no questions asked. And it was hey, we are like this because of this. They were very good at expressing that. And I was fortunate because not many guys have that. And that allowed me to deal with all of the other shit that you deal with in high school or college, and to be like, oh, well, the coach is like you because you're blah, 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 or you do this or whatever. All that other shit that bothered us and now really don't give a shit about, right? Like what people thought or care about, especially within that high school setting where You just want you just want to be cool with everybody. You don't want any of that bullshit, right? Like it was that of like that allowed the way they were allowed that to kind of, it was easier to deal with because you knew, hey man, like this is how they go about it. Right. And it was just, that's just what it was. I'm fortunate in that aspect. Same thing in college. I had college coaches that saw something, right? And it wasn't the measurables. You know what I'm saying? So to see a different side of it because they coached like that, like different ball game, man.
I feel like coaches can kind of, like, talent is one thing. Obviously, everybody loves talent. Okay.
Of course.
But then they see, can you shift your mindset when things are really hard? Like,
Are
can
you mentally tough, bro?
do I see you do I see the wheels turning, you trying to figure out, even if you're struggling, do I see you trying to figure it out? Or do I
Or do
see
you
you like,
continue to work harder when you're struggling? Or do you just
right,
quit and put your head in the sand and give up?
exactly. Do I see you continuing to try to
Do
figure
you
it out?
really live what, like, everybody says, yeah, I want to be the best player. Yeah, I want to work hard. Yeah, I'm gonna this, you know that. But do I see that? Do I watch you do that? Do you show up to workouts 5 minutes before and you're walking in when it's there, or are you there a half
And when I
hour
point
earlier?
it out, when I pointed out that you're not doing it, do you respond properly?
How do
Like
you handle that meeting?
Michael Jordan had it. It had to be pointed out to Michael Jordan. It had to be pointed. The guy who not Dean Smith, but Roy Williams pointed it out to him. Hey man, he's like, oh, I'm doing what everybody else is doing.
Yeah,
He's
you're
like,
like, well,
I thought
why?
you wanted to be the best in the world,
100%. Look, I
right?
say
So
it to my guys all
even
the time.
guys who are
Hey,
great,
you listen,
even
but
guys who
like
are great need to point it out, right? And do they
that too
respond from that?
is a huge part, right? And I think it's something that as coaches, especially at the high school level, the better players sometimes get cheated because that coach now feels like he's good. Bullshit. Hold him to a
Coach
higher
them.
standard. You're hurting him by not coaching him. And look, if you have to coach him a little bit different than you coach everybody else because he wants to go to that next level, you're only helping him in the long run. And if they can't handle it, then guess what? Maybe you ain't meant to be what you want to be, buddy. You know what I'm saying? Or when I get on you in the weight room for just you're doing what everybody else is doing, right? Or you're not bringing the intensity of what it is like every day in the weight room.
I pointed out
Why
something
is
yesterday
that,
that was.
brother?
I pointed out something yesterday after I calmed down. Later on, we were coaching the 11s. Later, and one of our kids caught a ball. He came down with it, but it got knocked out. They called it a catch. Okay. And I didn't say anything at the time. And I was like, I'm like, I just kind of maybe said, like, you gotta squeeze that ball, man. Something like that.
Right.
Later on, the ball went to that same individual. He caught the ball. They called it a catch again, but a kid ripped at it, and then it came out when he was on the ground. And he said to me, and he coached me. He's like, why are you mad? I'm like, you gotta. I said to him, you gotta squeeze the ball, and the person can't rip it out. I don't care if they call it catch, because eventually that ball is going to get dropped. They're not going to always give you that call. You got to hold on to the ball all the way through the ground,
It's the
right?
biggest part. It's
And
one of the biggest.
he was like, why you? What, he caught it. I'm like, he caught it now. I'm like, 2 times from now, that's going to be called the drop. And then what? And he was like, okay, but he understood it. He understood. I'm like, I'm not coaching him for this play right here. I know eventually they're going to call that an incompletion. Okay. Different referee with a different viewpoint of what a catch is, because we know how it can be. Every referee interprets whatever it is their own way. That's going to be an incompletion. And you don't want that incompletion to come at a point when it might matter down the line. And I don't mean right now. I don't mean a year from now. But if you keep letting that happen, then eventually, okay, that's going to happen at a time when you don't want that to happen, okay? Right now, it didn't matter. It had zero impact on the game. And so it's funny because I was coaching that aspect when it had zero impact to the game. Now, sometimes I let things go, right? I'm as flawed as anybody else. Lord knows that, okay? And sometimes I let it go. But I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to let this go because this is the second time I saw it happen. And I'm like, I don't want to happen the third time. And I think he will fix it. I think he will grab the
Right.
ball harder. He will
Right.
just grab it harder because you know what? He's thinking, oh, it's a catch. And then someone comes and rips it out, right? But now he will grab it harder because he will realize, okay, they may not give me that call, dude, from now on, like all the time. And I just think that it's a tiny thing that most people would say means absolutely nothing. And you could argue they're right. But you know what? Down the line, he will make that catch over and over again because he understands. He now understands. Kids have to understand. Okay. I don't always go about the right way. God knows that. But I happen to go about that one the right way. But that was kids have to understand that you could do this thing the right way and solve any future problem. And one of the things I always say in football, like when I coach a lot of, because I've coached my share of bad teams, I used to say to them all the time when we would lose a close game and they would blame a referee,
I hate
and I
that
would say,
shit.
I said, you know what? I said,
Just
take the game out of the referee's hands. That used to be,
right.
that was like our calling card at Pal Park Leonia, because
Right.
what we learned there was we were never going to get a call because we
Ever.
stunk.
Yeah, you're
All right.
terrible.
We
When you're
stunk.
bad, you don't get calls. It's just what it
You
is.
don't get calls. And I said, take it out of their hands. And as they started to understand that, they actually got better because they had to force themselves to get better because in their mind, they had to take it out of the referee's hands. And whatever, to me, whatever it took, but like
And
you
I
got
also
better
think that goes into that too, right? Like it's like, look, you want to blame one play or this play or that play. There's 7 other plays within the game that could have affected
probably
this, and we
20.
wouldn't even be in this situation,
Right.
right? Like,
Correct.
so learn
Win
to
the game so it doesn't matter what the referee calls. It doesn't matter that he calls a holding.
Doesn't
They
matter.
call a holding on you, score a touchdown the next play.
Correct.
Did they
Right.
tell you you can't score again?
Right.
That was
Right.
one of the other
You
things
throw
used to
you
say.
throw a pick, go score a touchdown on the next one, or go get a pick on defense. Like, you know what I mean?
Go
Like,
get a
it's just go. It's kind of that next play type of mentality, but it is interesting, right? Like, and I love that when you actually see it, right, where you coach something, and then when it happens again, that coaching point that kid took, and now it's worked, right? Like, I watched it this year with a kid who's a young buck, right? Like sophomore coming up, like, but he started to really buy into play as a corner, you know, when I'm late to the party and the guy's got him held up, like I'm going to punch at the ball and I'm going to work the rip and I'm going to work and he really, like, for some reason, man, it was like he just bought into it. And here you are week after week after week, and you're coaching the same shit. And little by little, you just start to see him, like, you know, like, okay, now he's in there, right? Like he's in the pile. That was the first part of it, right? Like, just get to the ball. Then next game, right? Like, okay, now we're in there, and now I see a punch or I see a rip, and I'm like, oh, all right, here we go, right? And now you're reinforcing this as you go, because when you're watching the tape, hey, great job here, looking for the strip, great job getting to the pile. Every week, there's a little bit more. Man, by the time we got to the end of the season, he was getting 1, 2, 3 a game. Like, literally, like, whether it was balls on the ground, right? And it wasn't like, you know, at first it was just like, ooh, ball on the ground. Oh, they got it, right? Now, some kids, that's a disappointment to them. Like, oh, I'm never going to do that again. We didn't even get it. No, he stuck with it. And every single time, something better just happened. And you kept pointing it out. And now, look, we're talking, and I don't mean to, like, bring it down, but it's JV. But you're talking about a sophomore that's now developing, taking coaching, getting better at it. And now that's going to be a part of his game that he has that other guys, once it's one and done and they don't get what they're expecting, they're going to put their head in the sand. That's a guy that I can now work with and say, hey, you know what? We're going to focus on this guy because he does everything right. He's coachable and he works at it. Right? I mean, shit, I used to see him now. He's at the end of practice and he's got another kid. Hey, dude, can you hold a ball for me for a second after the game? After we had done the drill in practice, he's staying after practice on his own, doing his own punch, trying to get it out. Like, he just bought in.
That is so, because what happens is there's going to come a point where he's eventually going to punch it out in a meaningful game. in a meaningful time.
Somebody's gonna scoop that
And
shit.
he's
We're gonna
been doing
score.
it, and he's been doing it hundreds of times before that till it actually comes to a meaningful time to do it. That's the
doubt.
thing. Like, you don't understand when that meaningful time is going to happen.
But you got to
And
be,
you,
if you prepare yourself
Yep.
for it, and we talk about it all the time, right? Like, you never know when opportunity is going to come, but if you're not prepared for it, that opportunity can come and go, and it never happened. But if you prepare for it, right, and it's there now, maybe when that opportunity presents itself, you're going to get it. But at least you're in a better situation for the positive aspect of it to happen than rather if you're not.
To me, I always feel much better about myself when I prepare to do things that I'm going to have an opportunity than the times that I haven't, right?
Correct.
The times you do it, because you just again, confident. Like, when people I always talk about like toughness. Toughness comes from confidence to me. You become a more confident player because you prepare. Okay. All these things, this is what builds your confidence. Like, when people say, oh, this person's a confident kid, there are certain kids that are confident naturally, but most confidence, real confidence comes from you preparing. Okay. Most toughness then comes from confidence because you prepared.
Absolutely.
If you prepare, like, you don't magic, like, look.
When you studied for a test and you went into that test knowing you knew everything, but like, it's the same shit.
We don't do things because of the outliers.
No.
Right? The kid who came out of the womb and was tackling everything, dude, like, he may not even be confident. That's who he is. Okay. But the majority of people have to prepare to get confident. Then they become
you gotta
confident.
work.
So then they're tough in whatever they do, or resilient.
Put the work in.
It's those steps. You can't bypass those steps. And even the most athletic person, it always comes down to this. If two guys have the same ability, the one who is prepared is going to win that battle because he's confident in his skill set. If two guys it doesn't matter. Like, oh, if this guy's better than that guy significantly, okay, yeah, it doesn't matter. But eventually, they're going to meet their equal. You're always going to meet your equal.
It's always going to come to fruition at some point. Like, you might be able to get away with it one or two times, but you know what? At some point, it's going to change. And that's when you're going to have to either, you know what I mean? Like, you've either been prepared or you've either been preparing for it, right? Or you've been just winging it and getting away with it. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's always going to be.
Len Bias was the guy that everybody wanted over Michael Jordan. One guy passed away, did drugs.
One guy's
the other one became the greatest player of all time. I mean, you can't point to two guys who are not more equal in their careers at that point than those two guys.
100%.
Okay, their approaches to the situation were completely different. Len Bias went and partied. Okay. And I don't care. Oh, he did it once. Listen, I don't buy into that. He did it once. Like, yeah, there are certain things that happen. Okay. That people do die when they do it the first time. You didn't have to do it. That's my whole thing is you did not have to do it. Whether he did it once or 100 times is really irrelevant. You did not have to do it is the main point. Michael Jordan, okay,
chose not to.
Chose his career, period. Okay, and I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, everybody in life is flawed. Okay, he has a million flaws. Everybody has flaws, but I'm talking about the sports aspect of it. That's how it worked, and he made more of the right decisions, and more of the right decisions led two people who were equal. You would argue were really, I mean, if you go back to that time and you watch them, not their abilities, their size, they both unbelievable players. And it's sad. And the Len Bias situation is sad. But, you have in the same instance, in the same year, the guys who are quote unquote with the same ability. And most people thought Len Bias was going to be the better player. Okay. But it became Michael Jordan. So, it's it's so important to just stay to your process, and nobody's saying it's fun all the time.
It's not
Believe
supposed
me.
to. Yeah, I'm sorry, it isn't. But the hard is what makes it great, dude. I'm sorry. I know that's a
Yes.
cliche line or whatever, but like when it does suck and you want no part of it or it's whatever, dude, like then it's just that's what makes it fun. Not everybody can handle it. Not everybody is doing it. And that's what makes it good. Like that's what makes it so enticing, or just the competitor in you. Like it is what it is, but not everybody's like that, man. But no, that was good, man. I appreciated him. He was
Really
awesome.
good.
Tomorrow we have Todd Fairley. He's coming on. He runs a private school program in PA, and I love it because the school itself, like you can't even get into it unless you play two sports.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good conversation. I've heard him speak twice now at clinics, and yeah, just a different approach to it. Really awesome, like program that he's kind of put together. It's Episcopal high school in PA, so it's a private school, but it's just dude, it's freaking awesome. The way he's approached it, and he's had success at a lot of places. Episcopal Academy, really good spot. So we'll have him tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Great.
All right,
Go enjoy the day.
Yeah.
Good night.
Talk to you later.
All right. Bye.